5 Live Formula 1.
Welcome to Melbourne. It's the third round of the 2023 Formula 1 World Championship, live here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We have got 58 laps of racing about to come around the Albert Park circuit, nestled in the little park around a lake a few miles south of the main city centre of Melbourne, in between Melbourne and St Kilda Beach. It's a beautiful place to go racing, and it's a very pleasant day after a few overcast days in Australia. It's clear blue skies, plenty of sunshine. Air temperature's only at 17.5 degrees, so it's not exactly a hot one, but it is a very, very pleasant one at least. It's just coming up to 2:45 local time, and it will be Max Verstappen, who is the championship leader, who will be starting on pole position. He's 1 point ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez in the championship. In Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, the two opening races of the season, the two Red Bulls finished first and second. Verstappen ahead of Perez in Bahrain, Perez ahead of Verstappen in Saudi Arabia. But the big difference here is that Verstappen is on pole and Sergio Perez starts from the pit lane. Alongside me, Jack Nicholls, in the commentary box is the former Williams reserve driver Jack Aitken. And Jack, Perez has got his work cut out if he's going to do anything really, starting from the pit lane.
Yes, they decided to try and make a few changes to that troublesome car of his after his multiple lockups in yesterday's FP3 and qualifying, trying to get to the bottom of those issues for Checo, but it's made what was already going to be a hard day for him even more difficult. So it'll be fascinating to see if he can replicate Max's performance from Jeddah and make his way up the grid in quick order, but it's going to be a tough race for him.
It'll be Verstappen starting on pole position, and then George Russell in second, Lewis Hamilton in third. Down on the grid for us is Rosanna Tennant, and Rosanna, Mercedes elated pretty much yesterday with that qualifying performance.
Yeah, I think it was a total surprise for them, actually. Lewis Hamilton saying it was incredible that they were that close to the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. And George Russell could barely hide his smile and his excitement about the prospect of starting on the front row. I think this is going to be an exciting race, especially given there are two Mercedes versus just the one Red Bull up front. They can play with their strategy. Max Verstappen, he's all alone.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso starts fourth on the grid for Aston Martin. What can the Mercedes do today? Can they challenge for the win and challenge Max Verstappen?
They'll be hoping to use their numbers against Max, because he's clearly, Max has had the fastest car this weekend, and they're not going to beat him on pure pace. And it looks like the strategy is leaning towards a one-stop. It's not going to be an easy one-stop, but they're going to have to try and use the numbers of Russell and Hamilton to maybe split the strategies and put the Red Bull under a bit of pressure and try and get them to crack that way, but it's going to be tough.
The race will be getting underway in 11 minutes here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Lewis Hamilton starting third on the grid. Yesterday he was talking about manifesting 2007, which was his Formula 1 debut, where he went around the outside at turn 1 and gained a load of places up into third spot. And a couple of moments ago, Rosanna caught up with his father, Anthony Hamilton, on the grid.
Anthony, a very positive day yesterday for the team. How's Lewis feeling ahead of this afternoon?
It's feeling really good, to be quite honest. The thing is, you always expect more in qualifying, and I think he felt like he was on for a great position, potentially pole. But we've just got to be grateful that we are where we are with the car, considering the car looked great yesterday. I think it's going to look good in the race. You just wish it had got that little bit extra.
And is he getting closer to finding the right people to surround himself with again, following the departure of Angela, his physio?
The whole team is behind Lewis, and he's got a great team of friends, great management team. Angela was phenomenal, and she was, for us, she was like the mama. If we had a worry about Lewis, Angela was there. He's in a good place with it.
Fantastic. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you very much. Nice to speak to you.
So that's Anthony Hamilton, Lewis Hamilton's father. Rosanna.
Truck drivers.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I'm with Christian Horner, Red Bull's team principal. It's an interesting challenge you've got this afternoon, Christian. One at the front, one in the pit lane. How do you approach this?
You run the best strategy you can for both of the cars. So the objective with Max is trying to convert the pole into the win, and for Checo is to get as far into the points as he can by the end of the race.
Checo was complaining about the car yesterday, some issue really kind of annoying him, as it were. Do the changes you make, new control electronics and a new energy store, do they make any difference today for his feeling?
We've chucked everything at him, so he didn't report any issues on the way on the reconnaissance laps. So hopefully it's addressed any issues that he may have had. But so we just need him to have a good race from there.
It's also 2 versus 1, 2 Mercedes against 1 Red Bull at the front. You jump first, you go long. How are you seeing this playing out?
Well, I think we've just got to get a good start and then try and run our own race. And for sure the Mercedes will be pushing hard behind, but we just got to look after these tyres and then see how the strategy plays out.
Good luck. Thank you so much. There we go, Jack. Christian Horner. A big challenge for Red Bull. Fast car, but you can't necessarily overtake around here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be the challenge for Sergio Perez. There are 4 DRS zones, but how far through the field can he come? Yesterday he was complaining because he went off multiple times. He elaborated a little more after the session and said basically it was something in the mechanics of the car or the electronics of the car kept pushing the brake balance way further forward than he wanted it to be. But he's starting at the back and he's got to try and carve his way through the field. What realistically can Perez do? Because this is the championship fight we're talking about, albeit starting the 3rd race of the season.
Yes, I mean, he's been pretty bullish about his chances this year to keep up with Max and challenge him potentially towards the end of the year. Certainly in the last races where he was the victor in Jeddah, but he's just not had the pace this weekend. He's been off Max and out of step pretty much the whole way through the Grand Prix weekend, and for him to make up all of that time during the race distance is going to be very tough, I think. So as he said after qualifying immediately after, it's going to be more about damage limitation.
So Perez starting from the pit lane, as is Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, but he qualified last anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference to him. Let's head back down to Rosanna.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I'm with the new team principal of Williams, James Vowles. You getting used to that yet? That new name, that title?
Not yet. Give me another year.
Oh, I like it. You're planning to stick around. Well, what about this afternoon then? Alex Albon having a great qualifying session yesterday in the Williams. I imagine his car's going to be as wide as possible this afternoon. Is anyone going to be able to overtake him?
I think you summed it up well. We know that we have to get our elbows out. We're in a very, very good position. That's the best the car could have delivered yesterday, but we have to be realistic. You can look behind us on the grid, 2 Alpines. We know they've been a few tenths faster than us the last few races, and I don't think it'll be any different here. We're going to be have to holding them up in the race. We got Perez in the pit lane. Again, he'll be over a second a lap faster, but it's Melbourne. It's not very wide. We've got a car that's fast in a straight line, so you described it well. We just need to get our elbows out and hold on to it.
Fantastic. Good luck, James. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, great job yesterday from Alex Albon in the Williams. He starts in 8th on the grid, the first time Williams have made it through to the final part of qualifying this season. And points are doable, I think Williams will be thinking, especially because Albert Park, even though you can't overtake, it does often throw up a little chaos at times.
That car has looked really good this weekend, and Alex has been doing a great job getting it up there in the times, both in the wet conditions and the dry that we had in FP2. But these hotter conditions, now that the sun's broken through and we're finally starting to get a bit of warmth, it's not what Williams want. That car, part of the reason that it's been good so far this weekend is that it is very strong in terms of warming up its tyres and building surface temperature, which is something that a lot of the other teams have been struggling with this weekend because the track surface is so smooth. So that's now going to start to work against them as they build more and more temperature through the stint. And we could see them have a bit more of a drop-off than the other guys. So yeah, Alex is going to have to work hard to keep those guys behind him.
Yeah, Albon starting in 8th position ahead of Pierre Gasly and Nico Hülkenberg, the rest of the top 10. Behind the 2 Mercedes, you've got Fernando Alonso in 4th place, Carlos Sainz in 5th in the Ferrari, 6th is Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, and 7th is Charles Leclerc in the other Ferrari. We are just about 5 minutes away from the start of the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. We'll bring you full, uninterrupted coverage of it in a few moments. But first, the latest BBC News with Laura Harms.
This is 5 Live Formula One with Jack Nichols.
Just 2 minutes to go till the formation lap begins for the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne. We are at the 3rd round of the Formula One World Championship season around the Albert Park Lake, just to the south of the city centre. And alongside me in the commentary box is Jack Aitken, the former Williams development driver. And Jack, we haven't touched on Ferrari yet. 5th and 7th for Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Leclerc saying yesterday, that it was one of his worst ever qualifying performances for him personally.
Yeah, I think he's probably also referring to, again, a lack of or some miscommunication. It was a bit of a mix-up in Q3. They had both cars through to Q3, obviously, and there was an opportunity for Carlos to give Charles a tow because Charles had opted to push straight away where Carlos had decided to do a build lap to warm his tyres further, and Charles was assured that he would get a tow from Carlos on the back straight, which he did not get, and instead actually his teammate ended up being caught in the middle of the very technical turn 3, 4, 5 sequence, and at the end Charles was heard on the radio sarcastically thanking his teammate for a tow in that very twisty section. Always good to get a speed boost there, he said. So they're still having problems in Ferrari, whether you say that's strategy or just simple communication, and it's been a tough weekend for them. The car doesn't look like it's working super well. I'm not sure what they're really expecting from today, but it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle for not a great start to the season already for them.
Yeah, 5th for Carlos Sainz, 7th for Charles Leclerc, but now the tyre warmers have been taken off the tyres, the mechanics have lowered the cars down onto the jacks, and now it's just the 18 cars sitting on the grid ready to start their formation lap. Bottas and Perez are lining up in the pit lane. It is 6 o'clock here on BBC Radio 5 Live, and it's time for the Australian Grand Prix. So the cars making their way around on the formation lap, and this is the grid order. Max Verstappen on pole position in the Red Bull. Alongside him on the front row will be George Russell in the Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton will be 3rd in the other Mercedes. 4th on the grid, Fernando Alonso. 5th is Carlos Sainz. Lance Stroll, Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly and Nico Hülkenberg complete the top 10. Esteban Ocon is in 11th spot ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Lando Norris only 13th for McLaren. Kevin Magnussen is 14th with Nick de Vries in 15th. The home hero, the Melbourneian Oscar Piastri, in his rookie Formula 1 season, lines up 16th on the grid for McLaren. Joe and Sargent are the 18 drivers starting on the grid. Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez will be starting from the pit lane. One driver we haven't mentioned in our little build-up has been Fernando Alonso. He is 4th on the grid for Aston Martin. What can he do to get into the mix today? He's been on the podium for the last 2 races.
Well, I mean, it's this circuit, it doesn't always throw up the most exciting racing, but it does sometimes throw up some surprises. So I think it's absolutely on the cards, but you know, we'll just have to see. I'll be interested to see how this plays out.
So Alonso will be lining up 4th on the grid. The cars now making their way down towards turn 11. The relatively long run down towards the quite open and quite fast right-hander at turn 1 has caught a lot of drivers out in the past. 2002 there was a huge jump with Ralf Schumacher going over the back of Rubens Barrichello. Chaos ensued. There's often a front wing lost in that first corner.
It's very easy to snatch an inside front there, and especially when you lose that downforce from following the pack of cars, it is pretty treacherous, this circuit in particular, and to get into turn 3 ahead of your rivals is pretty crucial as well, because it's very technical thereafter and difficult to overtake. So it's really a crucial spot, but also very, very tricky, a tight line to walk the tightrope.
Jack Aitken alongside me in commentary. Down in the paddock is Rosanna Tennant.
Thanks, Jack. It's absolutely beautiful here in Melbourne. We've had some inclement weather, haven't we, over the weekend, but now it's set fair, and I think the likes of Sir Lewis Hamilton were hoping for a bit of rain to spice things up. Let's hope, as you say, the Albert Park circuit can throw up a few surprises regardless. I think this is going to be a fantastic race. The crowd are on their feet in the grandstands. Melbourne are ready to watch Formula 1 right up close and personal.
Overnight, Anthony Joshua returned to winning ways with a unanimous points victory over Jermaine Franklin at the O2 Arena in London. Arsenal have kept their 8-point advantage at the top of the Premier League after beating Leeds 4-1, despite Man City beating Liverpool by the same scoreline yesterday lunchtime. And later on the day, Steve Crossman will bring you all of the build-up to today's Premier League action on 5 Live Sport. The Australian Grand Prix about to get underway. Verstappen on pole, Russell alongside him. It's a quick lights out and it's a good start from Russell. Down towards the first corner, the Mercedes has the inside line. Verstappen tries to come across to cover. He tries to sweep around the outside, but Russell takes the lead. George Russell hits the front and Verstappen is down to second. And now Alonso is getting feisty with Lewis Hamilton on the run down towards turn 3. And Hamilton sends it to the inside of Verstappen. It's almost a Mercedes 1-2. And off into the gravel goes Charles Leclerc. Hamilton gets ahead. It's a Mercedes 1-2. Russell, Hamilton, Verstappen is third, Sainz is fourth, Alonso is down to fifth, and Charles Leclerc might be beached in the gravel and potentially out of the Grand Prix on the opening lap. What a dream start from the two Mercedes. That would have been exactly how Toto Wolff's dream went last night.
That's got to be a safety car. I can't see Charles getting out of that gravel trap, but it's still green for now. We've got the two Alpines fighting on the run down to turn 9. They're side by side, and Albon's having a look at Alonso as well into turn 9. He doesn't get through, but good start for him as well.
Yeah, Albon's managed to go from 8th up into 6th, assisted by the spin for Charles Leclerc, but he's also managed to get ahead of Lance Stroll, and the safety car is deployed now for Charles Leclerc in the gravel trap down at turn 3. He's out of the car, and a disappointing weekend for Charles Leclerc just gets a little more disappointing as he is out on the opening lap. Ferrari felt they were in better shape here than in the previous 2 races, so we're frustrated with qualifying, but Sainz has got him into 4th at least, but Leclerc out. Didn't actually see what happened to him. There was so much going on down at turn 3. Was it a collision, or whether he just lost it by himself?
It looked like he was on the outside, so it's possible he got tagged on the rear, but if he did, it was only a slight touch. We'll have to watch a replay to see, but Ocon now is diving into pit lane, so I'm not sure if he's picked up damage. It doesn't look like it. He's just taking the opportunity to jump onto the hard tyre, maybe go long in this race. And in the background we see Perez as well looking to do the same. But Verstappen looked like he had absolutely no grip at the start there. Really struggling. Didn't have the confidence to fight Russell as hard as you would normally see him fight into turn 1, and then was completely swamped in the braking zone. He had Hamilton up the inside and Sainz on the outside going into turn 3, and just looked powerless, really.
So as far as tyres are concerned, I haven't actually covered that off. Actually, we're just going to see what happened. Let's go down to Rosanna.
Well, as we hopefully get a replay of the start, I can tell you that changing onto the hard tyre right now, Jack, you could actually run to the end of the race. We saw that happen with Alex Albon last year, so maybe an inspired move from the Alpine there with Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting strategy for those that have come into the pit lane. Basically, it was Stroll that hit Leclerc, and to be fair, Leclerc kind of squeezed Stroll. He kind of had nowhere to go, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just one of those first lap incidents. Stroll had guys on the inside of him, and it was very close to tagging his teammate Alonso with his front right. And yeah, Charles was coming in from the left, just nowhere to go, not enough racetrack, and as soon as you get contact on that rear corner, the car spins around.
So that means that after 3 races of the season, Charles Leclerc will have 6 World Championship points. So it's a very tough start to the season for him. He was saying on Thursday, oh, yep, we never think the championship is out of reach. There's a long way to go. And look, there is still a long way to go, but there's a long way to go in terms of points as well. George Russell is leading the Grand Prix. We're behind the safety car. Hamilton is second. Verstappen is third. Started on pole, got taken by Russell at the start, then got taken by Hamilton at turn 3. Carlos Sainz is fourth in the Ferrari, the sole remaining Ferrari. Fifth is Alonso in the Aston Martin. Albon is up into 6th. Stroll, Gasly, Hülkenberg and Tsunoda is the top 10. Then it's Norris, Magnussen, Piastri, De Vries and Ocon, the top 15. Safety car will be coming in this lap. And George Russell at the start, Jack Aitken, did a really good job to send it in at turn 1 because he was on the less grippy line.
He had an immediate jump off the line, so the launch of the Mercedes was excellent, and that gave him the half a car length that he needed to get alongside, and he finished off the job into turn 1. More interesting behind was Hamilton got a great run, here's Leclerc.
That's it. Lance touched my rear right wheel.
Copy, understood.
Now we're on board with Verstappen. You just hear there's a little bit of wheel spin as he gets into the second phase of his start. He knows that the gig is up in turn 1, gets on the brakes, and actually he manages to bulk Lewis Hamilton, who had a really great run behind him. Hamilton had to lift off, and that's what gave the run and cause a bit of a traffic jam behind him, Hamilton had the confidence to jump up the inside in turn 1, and they got so close to making contact. It's not the first time for these guys, but they managed to get through okay.
He pushed me off the track. I was ahead of the apex. He pushed me off.
Understood. That's Verstappen complaining about Hamilton pushing him off the track, but I don't think anything could be further from the truth, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's an ambitious call, isn't it? I mean, we're on board with Hamilton now, and Hamilton does push him wide, but they're alongside, and there was curb that Verstappen was able to use. I wouldn't say that it's likely you'll get a penalty for that.
Yeah, I don't think that one will hold up. So as far as tyres are concerned, everybody is starting on the medium compound tyre, bar Pierre Gasly in 8th place. He's on the soft. Some of the drivers towards the back of the order have done different strategies and come into the pits. In fact, Perez and Sargent have pitted twice, so they're back now on the hard compound of tyre. But safety car comes in. George Russell leads the way out of the final corner and across the line to get racing back underway in Melbourne. Mercedes first and second. Russell ahead of Hamilton, but Max Verstappen, who has been the class of the field so far this year, is lurking with intent in 3rd spot. He wants to get back towards the front. Carlos Sainz is 4th in the Ferrari. 5th is Alonso. Albon, Stroll, Gasly, Hülkenberg and Tsunoda are the rest of the top 10. Lap 4 of 58 in the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Now, what can the Mercedes do? I think if only one Mercedes had got ahead at the start and Verstappen was there in 2nd place, you'd say, oh, it's going to be tough for them to hang on and win this. It's still going to be very tough for them to hang on and win this, but they've got 2 cars ahead of the Red Bull and Verstappen.
Yeah, and it's, as we've mentioned several times, it's not easy to overtake here. Verstappen, though, is already closing on the back of Hamilton. He's having a look into turn 9, but he knows he can't really send it down the inside there, so he backs off, but he looks like he's got the pace, and Mercedes really need to hold him back and hold track position if they want to have a chance in this race.
Down into the tight right-hander at turn 11 at the end of the back straight, from over 200 miles an hour down to 70 miles an hour, and then flinging it right as the shadows begin to elongate as it comes up to 10 past 3 in Australia. The autumn beginning down under, and the season of Formula One only just beginning as well. The 3rd round of the championship down towards the 1st corner, and I think once the DRS gets activated, which will be next time around, the drag reduction system, the little opening slot in the rear wing, Verstappen will be close enough to the Mercedes to try and challenge.
And the Red Bull DRS is widely considered by the grid as one of the most effective, one of the most efficient systems, and it's already faster in a straight line than the Mercedes, so when the DRS starts working, Hamilton's going to have a world of worry trying to keep him behind, but as we said, crucial to their chances. Russell's not really managing to sprint ahead here. He's only got a 8/10 gap to Hamilton, and Hamilton has only got a 6/10 gap to Verstappen, so they're all quite tightly packed at the moment.
The Red Bull quick in a straight line as they come up towards turns 9 and 10. A quick left-right flick. The Mercedes and the Red Bull are dropping the Ferrari a little of Carlos Sainz. Sainz is 1.5 seconds back from this lead trio. Hamilton just nosing towards the inside a little bit down at turn 11, maybe suggesting that he's got a little more pace than George Russell, or at least he's trying to suggest that to the team.
Yeah, that's going to be the conversation that comes up pretty soon if it's not happening already. Hamilton's going to be trying to stick as close as he can to his teammate to show, hey, I've got the pace, I'm your best chance here, let me through, let me build a gap.
Verstappen closing in on the back of Hamilton down towards turn 1 as they fight over 2nd place. George Russell is still leading. 1 win to his name last season in Brazil for George Russell, looking to add a 2nd in Melbourne, but it's going to be a long way through. Perez, meanwhile, is up into 17th place, so he started on the hard tyre, came in for a set of mediums, back onto the hard, so he's done all of his pit stops now, Sergio Perez, so he could arguably go to the end of the race on the hard tyres. Whether the hard tyres can last, it remains to be decided. It remains to be seen. It's not quite as durable as it was last time out in Saudi Arabia.
I think that safety car has actually made his life a little bit harder, because he's now got 3 cars ahead of him that have done their pit stops in the same way that he has. They're all on the hard tyre. They've got no stops to help in terms of overtaking, and he's not ripping through this field in the way that he would have hoped.
DRS is now enabled, and Hamilton is really closing in on the back of George Russell, and Russell is having to cover the inside coming down into turn 11.
Yeah, not sure what... Yeah, well, Russell clearly not intent on giving that position away just yet. There's not been any call, but Hamilton was definitely close enough to make a move if George hadn't defended.
And Verstappen is really close to the back of Hamilton, just 0.4 of a second between them as they flash out over the start-finish straight. The sound you can hear is the engine in the back of the Red Bull coming down towards the first corner. And Verstappen sets the fastest lap of the race.
And then is superseded by Sainz and Alonso behind him, so the cars behind for the first time are quicker than the leaders. Here's Russell.
You're asking me to manage and I'm being attacked by my own teammate. You tell me if I wasn't going to push to defend, I'll push now.
Okay, so Russell is being told to manage, which means basically look after your tyres, keep them as fresh as possible. But Hamilton, his teammate, is trying to attack him. So he's saying, well, I can't be careful if my teammate's then going to attack me.
It's a fine balance because there are grading concerns.
Oh, Albon's in trouble. Albon's dropping down the order, and he's had a crash. Albon's had a big crash at turn 6.
Is he going to get beached on that curve? He's halfway across the exit curve of turn 6. He has damage to the front and the rear, but we saw the rear wheels moving. I think he's stuck. I think he's beached.
And the safety car is deployed again. For the second time this race, the safety car is deployed. Alex Albon has crashed out of the Australian Grand Prix, and that is a real shame for Albon.
Are we going to see one of the leaders box here for a hard tyre?
Potentially. Ferrari are lurking in the pit lane. If you pit behind the safety car, you lose less time, but also you're going to come out in traffic. I think that's the big risk. Here's Albon's radio.
Make sure you're all okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Russell has pitted from the lead. George Russell has pitted from the lead of the Australian Grand Prix. Very interesting gamble here from Mercedes. They give up track position. They go onto the hard tyres. The front left looked a little sticky, but ultimately it's behind the safety car, so it doesn't lose a huge amount of time. Sainz has pitted as well. This is very interesting because they're going to come out a relatively long way down the order. 7th place for George Russell as he emerges, but he doesn't have to pit again. Oh, this is a tight call, this from Mercedes, because he's in 7th, Russell, but he's going to be behind when the race starts again. Hülkenberg and Gasly and Stroll and Alonso. So he's got to hope he can stay in touch with Hamilton and Verstappen, and that also means Hamilton won't have the DRS now, so he'll be way more exposed in his fight with Verstappen. Really interesting call from Mercedes. What happened to Albon? Oh, I think he got on the grass on the way in, and he's just crashed all by himself at turn 6. Oh, and I tell you what, the Alpine of Gasly so nearly got wiped out in that.
Yeah, we'll have to have hopefully a closer look at that. We only had a broad overhead shot, but he started to lose the rear almost immediately from turn-in, which is pretty unusual. So just skipped across the gravel, front and rear, hitting the barriers. So that's a real shame, because this was a real point-scoring opportunity, and we're getting a shot of him with the marshals now, looking pretty dejected. So unfortunate end to the race for him.
Yeah, just dropped down to his haunches, Alex Albon, and is out of the race. Here's Hamilton's radio.
That's put me at a massive disadvantage.
We don't think so. So Verstappen stayed out also.
So Hamilton's saying this has put me at a massive disadvantage. Pete Bonington on the radio saying, no, we don't think so. Hamilton stayed out also. I can't work this one out. What do you think it's going to be?
I think it is a big risk.
Red flag. Red flag. The race has been halted then, presumably in order to fix the barriers or to clear all the gravel. Probably is going to be the bigger issue.
This is a massive issue for George, because now can they change tyres?
Yes.
So he's just done that pit stop and lost track position for nothing.
Yeah, that's very true. Under red flag conditions, everybody can come into the pit lane, line up and change their tyres, and so as a result, that's a big hit for Mercedes. So now we've just gone on board with Alex Albon. He didn't hit the grass, actually. I thought he might have hit the grass. But
he looked like he was okay, so maybe he did just lose the rear with a little bit of tailwind in that section, but we're going to get the onboard view from the car behind, which is Stroll. There's no kick up of dust. He just loses the rear, so very strange, but yeah, at some point. But yeah, that's a massive hit for Mercedes. They've really lost out big time there. Not just, of course, Russell, the big loser, but Mercedes needed 2 cars really against Red Bull, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it's a straight fight just between Hamilton and Verstappen, with Hamilton having no DRS, then they're going to be in a bit of trouble here, Mercedes. So lap 9 of 58. Red flag is out at the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Hamilton is leading. Verstappen is second. Alonso is third. Lance Stroll is fourth. Fifth is Pierre Gasly. Hülkenberg is sixth. Russell is seventh. Tsunoda 8th, Norris 9th, Piastri 10th, Sainz, De Vries, Ocon, Perez and Zhou the top 15, Bottas, Sargent, Magnussen, the 18 drivers. Out of the race we have Albon and Leclerc, and the red flag wise, it wasn't too big a crash for Alex Albon, but he did go heavily into the Tech Pro barriers, so maybe they need to repair the Tech Pro a little. They also need to clear all the gravel from the circuit, which is much easier to do when there aren't cars going round behind the safety car. So I would predict this should be a fairly short red flag.
It is easier, obviously, when the cars aren't on track, but the pack was going to be bunched up behind the safety car, so I'm still a little perplexed as to why they felt the need to red flag that, unless there was really significant damage to the barrier. We're just seeing a shot of Russell jumping out of his car and a shake of the head already. He knows what this means. But yeah, the drivers will go off and have a little comfort break, even if it's not going to be too long a red flag. It's an opportunity to reset, regroup before you get back in the car.
So the reason Russell is frustrated and Hamilton is looking frustrated as well is because Mercedes were in as strong a position as possible. When the safety car was deployed, they rolled the dice, pitting George Russell in order so that he could then go to the end of the Grand Prix without pitting again. It felt a gamble even at that point, even if there was no red flag, it felt a gamble. But now, because of the red flag, everyone can come into the pits, and this rule that I still don't like this rule, to be honest. I haven't liked this rule since what was it, the 2013 Monaco Grand Prix, when it kind of ruined the spectacle a little there, when I think Button was closing in on Vettel or something like that. I can't remember, but everyone was on different tyres and it was getting quite interesting. But the red flag means that you can change tyres. Russell's gone straight to the back of the garage to have a conversation with Toto Wolff, and you can see the disappointment in Russell's face as he has the conversation with Wolff. And it felt like a gamble even before the red flag.
Just saw George making reference to, it's hard to make out what they're saying, but he definitely was making reference to Red Bull there, and I think he's making the same argument that we are, that they need 2 cars up there. But yeah, if we play the speculative game here, and what would have happened if there hadn't been a red flag, it would have been very tough for George, because those cars in front of him, some of them would have been trying to stay out for another 10 laps.
Sorry, George, that screwed us, but let's do the most out of it. We can still go to the front on the podium, or better.
Yeah, it's not your fault, guys. That was a good call.
Well, that was Toto Wolff coming on the radio saying the red flag has screwed us, and well, I mean, it absolutely has. And Russell saying, yeah, it's not your fault. I mean, it's one of those where it didn't look like a red flag accident for Alex Albon, you know. Or Nico Hülkenberg so nearly got wiped out in all of that. That was sketchy.
There was a big cloud of dust that got kicked up by the gravel when Albon's car came to rest back half on the circuit. Hülkenberg's view, he had no idea where that car was, so he gave it a little bit of room extra to be safe. And out of the dust, the rear end of Albon's car just appeared on the racing line. So a very, very narrow escape there for Hülkenberg. But yeah, it's a real shame. But we still got a battle on our hands here with Hamilton and Verstappen. Hamilton did look the faster of the 2 Mercedes, whether or not that's because he wasn't managing. But yeah, he'll have to try and break that DRS as soon as he can, because with the straight line advantage that the Red Bull has over the Mercedes, as soon as Verstappen gets into striking distance of Hamilton, it could be a pretty easy overtake for him. So we'll have to wait and see on that one.
So red flag out in the Australian Grand Prix, lap 9 of 58. Rosanna Tennant is down in the paddock and pits, and Rosanna, I mean, what a start that was. That would have entertained the crowd.
Yeah, great start, and 2 safety cars. I mean, they're getting what they paid for, the crowd today, and I tell you what, it's been a record crowd as well. Over the race weekend, we've had 444,631 people at Albert Park Circuit, and today 131,000, just over that. So they're getting a spectacle. I tell you what though, Jack, last night here, as you well know, the clocks went back in Melbourne, so we all got an extra hour in bed, but it does mean, of course, sunset's going to come fairly quickly. We're talking about this being the quickest Australian Grand Prix potentially, but let's hope this red flag doesn't last too long, otherwise we might get into the twilight zone.
Yeah. The first Australian Grand Prix I went to actually in 2009 as a punter, as it were, saved up all my race will get back underway in 10 minutes time, so it hasn't been too long a red flag, but to be fair, there was gravel all over the circuit, and there are marshals all over the circuit clearing up the gravel, so I can see the reason for the red flag. But yeah, that 2009 race saved up my Sainsbury's checkout money and went out to Melbourne. It was the one where Jenson Button won in the Brawn. But I think that race started at like 5 p.m. or something. It was almost dark come the end of the race. It was dark by the time the podium happened, and because it's all shaded around the Albert Park circuit, loads of trees, the drivers were really struggling to see, basically, because it was under the shadow of the trees. It was so dark.
When you get that low sun, it can be some of the worst visibility because it's streaming straight into your eyes at points around the circuit. It's horrible.
Alex Albon just walking past me, Jack. He's still got his helmet on, hands device still attached. Obviously not keen to talk to anyone. I mean, he's walked past his hospitality area. He's walked past the garage. Oh, no, hang on. The hospital. You see, unfortunately, due to Williams' performance last year, their hospitality suite in the paddock is nearer to Adelaide than it is Melbourne. I'd got a little disoriented. He has got into the Williams hospitality, so hopefully he'll be coming into the media pen to tell us what really happened, because as you say, Jack, it was slightly strange as he went into that part of the track to completely lose it, but really sad, because I think we were all billing Alex Albon as the captain of the DRS train this afternoon. I think he was in the prime seat to take some points for the team this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was as good as chance as they're going to get over the course of the season, I think, the Williams team. So the race is going to be getting underway in 8 minutes time. We will be resuming racing, drivers hopping back into their cars. Hamilton leading, Verstappen second, Alonso third, Stroll fourth, Gasly fifth, Hülkenberg, Russell, Tsunoda, Norris and Piastri are the top 10. The other driver that this red flag has stitched up is Carlos Sainz, because he did the same thing as George Russell, pitted for the hard tyres, took the same gamble, and he's down in 11th place now. So both, at the moment, no points for Ferrari. Now, I think Sainz will get back up into the points, but maybe not very far into the points.
Yeah, it's been even worse for Sainz, isn't it? Because there were a few cars that filtered past pit lane before he had the chance to rejoin, and it's got even more traffic to work through than Russell. It's going to be hard. I mean, everyone should be able to make it to the end now on the hards, unless there's a lot more degradation than we're expecting or more graining issues. But the hard tyre has been pretty good in that sense. The teams feel fairly confident they should be able to do that. Just looking at a replay of Hamilton and his turn 3 overtake on Verstappen, and Verstappen did squeeze him very hard on the way into the corner, and there's definitely no love lost there, but he left the door open as well, Verstappen, which is slightly surprising. He's usually not one to give up that kind of space.
And he was quite tentative as well on the brakes, because he had the Aston Martin coming to the outside as well. To be honest, I wasn't expecting Hamilton to pull that move off. I thought that Verstappen would be able to because he was there on the outside, I thought that would give him the inside for the next corner, but he couldn't quite keep it together. So it was impressive stuff from Hamilton.
He was just giving his front wing a bit of a shake as he got out of the car like 10 minutes ago or so, and giving the signal to his mechanic of, we're going to change it, because he clearly thought that there'd been a little bit of contact in that first lap, but I think he got away with that one. Actually, it didn't look like there was any contact in the end.
Jack Aitken alongside myself, Jack Nichols, and Rosanna Tennant, bringing you coverage of the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Red flag is out for a crash for Alex Albon. Albon is fine, but they needed to clear away some of the debris. Here's Carlos Sainz's radio.
Red flag.
No.
Red flag.
No.
No way.
No. No.
That was his reaction to the red flag. Here's Hamilton.
Okay? Yeah, copy. We think it may just be barrier damage.
Here's Hulkenberg.
Oh, that was scary. That Williams, there was a cloud, he couldn't see the car.
Yeah, wild. He's fine, by the way, he's out of the car.
So that was Hulkenberg saying he couldn't see the car because he was in a cloud. It was almost reminiscent. Oh, I've committed to this and I can't remember who it was. Red Bull Ring Formula 3. It was
I know exactly what you're talking. Turn 6.
It was
Ryan Tvita and
yes.
He was the hitter, the hittee. I can't remember who it was.
I think it was a generational guy, like a Fittipaldi or a Piquet or a...
Yeah, but it was a similar kind of thing. Spun through the gravel, landed back on the racing line with a cloud of dust between him and the rest of the cars. And Ryan Tvita, I think it was, came flat chat through the gravel or through the dust, and unfortunately didn't have time, launched over the back of this car. It's a very scary thing, and as a driver, you're taking those kind of calculated risks all the time, because if Nico Hulkenberg had come across that dust cloud and lifted completely out of it, you can be sure that there would have been 2 or 3 cars queuing up behind him to overtake and take the risk where he wouldn't. So he left that extra car width to the racing line, and luckily for him it was just enough.
Fairly brutal tweet here from Robert on #BBCF1. Albon doing more for Red Bull in a Williams. So a bit brutal, but fairly astute. Perez is another driver who's, well, he hasn't necessarily lost out in all of this. He's 14th, but he is now going to be on the same tyres as everybody else, and no one else will necessarily have to pit in front of him. So, I mean, it's a kind of a middle ground for Perez, that one.
It's the same as what we mentioned earlier, that it kind of, it's a middle ground. It's brought him closer to the leader in theory, because it's going to bunch the field up again, but he's lost the strategic element of being able to jump cars on the pit stop either by doing an undercut or an overcut, and that was going to be quite a big part of his afternoon, because he didn't make up enough places on the first lap. He was only up to 17th, I think, after the first lap, which just isn't good enough. You need to jump up as many cars as you can in the melee of the start. So he's got a long afternoon ahead of him to get well into the points. I'm sure he'll get there, but how far into the points will he get?
Hamilton leading, Verstappen second, Alonso third, Stroll fourth. The race getting underway in 2 minutes' time. They'll go out behind the safety car for a lap. The safety car will come in, and then the race will get back underway. This is the sound on board of Albon's crash at turn 6. It was almost as he went back on throttle.
It started earlier. I mean, he did pick up the throttle again, but the rear had already started sliding. It just looks like the kind of thing that would happen to a car that has absolutely used up all of its rear tyres, and they've just got nothing left to give, which after 7 laps shouldn't be the case. But we did say that the Williams was going to be harder on its tyres than others, so perhaps that overheating stage had already started on the surface of those tyres. We're just going to get another replay of Hulkenberg's narrow escape, and my God, it was less than half a metre between the 2 cars.
Thank you to Bethany. It was Pedro Piquet that had the spin. I knew it was someone with some heritage. Right, Hamilton, the engine firing up in the pit lane as he gets ready to resume the Australian Grand Prix. We're on lap 9 of 58, so this delay will have been, maybe 20 minutes or so. So I would suggest we've got about an hour and 10, an hour and 15 remaining in this race, as they are about to remove the tyre blankets and everybody will head back out onto the circuit. And presumably the majority of the field will now be on a set of the hard tyres. And I mean, it isn't a complete given that these tyres will go to the end, fully easy peasy.
Just looking at Oscar Piastri waiting to get going again, and they're winners out of all of this, aren't they? Both McLarens in the top 10 now, 9th and 10th. So they've benefited from the melee of the start, Albon's crash, Sainz's pit stop, and managed to move up a few spots. So they'll be hoping they can hold on to those positions, but the tyre warmers have now been lifted, mechanics away from the cars. They're just waiting for the green light at the end of pit lane, and the safety car will lead them out.
Lap 9 of 58. Hamilton will be leading the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen second. Third for Fernando Alonso. Fourth for Lance Stroll. Fifth is Pierre Gasly. Sixth will be Nico Hülkenberg. Russell, Sainz, Tsunoda and Norris will be the top 10. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong list. Because it's different on the timing screens than what it actually is because of the red flag. Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso was all true. Stroll in fourth. Gasly fifth. Hülkenberg 6th, 7th for Russell, 8th Tsunoda, 9th Norris, 10th Piastri. Sainz is down in 11th in the Ferrari. De Vries, Ocon, Perez and Zhou the top 15. Bottas, Sargent and Magnussen, the 18 drivers still running. Alex Albon and Charles Leclerc out of the race. We're behind the safety car here on 5 Live. A couple of football matches coming up later on this afternoon. There's a big relegation 6-pointer at 2 p.m. as West Ham host Southampton. 19th versus 20th in the Premier League. We'll have full commentary of that from 2. And then at 4 o'clock it's Newcastle versus Manchester United at St James's Park. And we will have live commentary of that as well here on 5 Live.
So we're going to have, with these, it still feels like a relatively new regulation that will have standing starts after a red flag.
Yeah, that's true. And
this is going to be very important for the guys that are out of position, namely Russell, Sainz, Perez, his Verstappen.
Wait, this is more than 10 car lengths. Look, check it.
So he's referring to the rule that the leader of the train, which in this case is Hamilton, can't leave more than 10 car lengths to the safety car until the lights are extinguished. And I have to say, it is quite a bit more than 10 car lengths, so he's got a point.
Yeah, interesting. De Vries and Sargent have gone out on the medium tyres, 12th and 15th. Everybody else is out on the hard tyres as Hamilton now picks up the pace. And there's some shufflings around. Okay, Sargent is dropping back. There's some shuffling around going on out there, which just confused me a little.
I think it's because of the backing up. Hamilton's backed off massively from the safety car and then sort of sprinted up to try and warm up his tyres. And that accordion effect translating to the back often means you get cars that are surprised. So Sargent may have just blasted past them by accident.
Yeah.
And then given those positions back to filter back into his correct slot. But be interesting. Let's see if Verstappen can rectify his start. They will have been looking at the data during that red flag to see what went on in the original start. Likewise, Mercedes will be doing everything they can to replicate the start that Russell had for Hamilton.
So we're going to be starting lap 10 of 58. We're just about to get a replay of what happened. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. And Zhou came steaming past because the back of the field was basically stopped. And whoa, Magnussen came flying through and cut the gravel and went past everyone. That was really sketchy at the back of the pack.
And that's why you're not supposed to leave more than 10 car lengths, because it's exactly the kind of thing that can cause accidents under those slower conditions. But anyway, they are now lining up. We'll see if the stewards look into that.
Hamilton will be starting on pole position then. We're about to get the race going again from a standing start. So it's basically a race. We start again, but with 10 fewer laps. It'll be lap 10 of 58 when the race gets back underway. Hamilton in the pole position grid slot. Max Verstappen alongside him on the front row. Then Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll are 3rd and 4th. 5th is Gasly, 6th Hülkenberg, 7th Russell, Tsunoda, Norris and Piastri, the top 10. Here come the lights. The racing in Australia is back underway, and it's another bad start, I think, for Verstappen, and Alonso could have a chance here on the outside, down towards turn 1. Alonso jinks to the outside, but he can't get around. Hamilton holds the lead. Stroll has lost places. Pierre Gasly has gone from 5th up to 3rd, and Russell has got a pretty decent getaway as well, as he's got ahead of Lance Stroll too. So Hamilton leading, Verstappen 2nd still, Alonso is 3rd, then 4th is Pierre Gasly, 5th is George Russell. There's contact at the back. I think it's Nick De Vries that has been pinged up in the air a little in one of the Alpha Tauris. Not quite sure what happened there, but Hamilton has managed to hold the lead. The restart procedure is under investigation, so Hamilton presumably under investigation for that restart, for maybe not leaving in too much of a gap behind the safety car. But Verstappen didn't get a great getaway. There's a fight going on here down towards turn 10 and 11. It's side by side, and that's Hülkenberg trying to get ahead of Stroll for 6th position. But a great restart from Russell. He's got himself up into 5th place, and if he can dispatch Gasly, he is back in the sort of fight-ish for the lead. But Hamilton is leading on lap 10 of 58.
Yeah, it was a similar situation as what we had in the first start. Verstappen just seemingly didn't quite get the traction of the cars around him, and Alonso wasn't able to get fully alongside on the outside, backed out of it, tried to get the run through to turn 3, but Verstappen this time around much more confident on the brakes and not giving that opportunity. So it looks like he's getting into the rhythm a little bit quicker. Sainz didn't make up nearly as many places as he would have liked, still stuck in 10th behind a big old train of cars. Likewise, Perez still down in 16th, so not the start that those guys would have wanted.
Yeah, he got ahead of Piastri, and that was it. Oh, now he's throwing one down the inside of Lando Norris, his former McLaren teammate, into turn 3, and he makes that move stick, so he's up in the 9th place. That was nice, decisive stuff from Carlos Sainz, and I think Norris realised that wasn't his fight to get involved with. Russell got such a good getaway, immediately getting ahead of the Haas, and then sending it to the outside of Lance Stroll at turn 1 and making that one stick as well. So very, very nice restart from George Russell to get up into those positions. What happened with Nick de Vries a little further back in the pack, coming down into the right-hander of turn 3, and he just clipped the front right of Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. So he had the right-hander, then as he opened up the steering kind of to squeeze Ocon, he just got hit.
It was kind of his own fault, but I mean, he was trying to slide his way out to the outside. He knew Ocon was there, but he was slightly ahead of him, tried to sort of force him out of road and get him to back out of the throttle, and Ocon didn't, and as a result had de Vries drive over his front right wheel and launch up in the air.
Still going though, both of them. Hamilton is leading the way. The sound you can hear though is Max Verstappen in 2nd place, and it's looking pretty ominous at the moment. He's just half a second away from Lewis Hamilton as they come down into turn 3. Now left at turn 4, flat out through the right-hander of turn 5, heading down towards turn 6 where Albon had his accident earlier on. Might not even need DRS here, Max Verstappen. He's that close to the back of Hamilton. They've dropped Alonso already. Alonso is 3 seconds back from the top 2, so Hamilton's doing all he can, but the DRS is open now for Verstappen as he sweeps to the outside, coming up towards 9 and 10, and makes the move. Max Verstappen takes the lead of the Australian Grand Prix and will start to disappear up the road now from Hamilton. Verstappen hits the front, Hamilton down to 2nd, Alonso 3rd, Gasly 4th, Russell in 5th. But I think Max Verstappen might be unstoppable now for the remainder of this race.
That was almost insultingly easy, wasn't it?
Yes.
We knew that there was a straight line advantage for the Red Bull, and as soon as that DRS was activated, he was able to get ahead of Hamilton cleanly before the braking zone for turn 9, no problem at all. And then to add insult to injury, he had the DRS coming out of turn 10 as well, and he's already gapped him by 2 seconds.
Wow.
In just half a lap.
So Verstappen leading 2 seconds ahead of Hamilton, lap 13 of 58 in the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. 3rd round of the season, and Max Verstappen is leading the way. His teammate Sergio Perez is down in 16th, so this could take Verstappen's lead at the top of the championship up to 27 points potentially at the end of this race. And yeah, Verstappen had such a speed advantage being in the slipstream of Hamilton and the DRS, and he just breezed around on the outside. So Verstappen leading, Hamilton 2nd, Alonso 3rd, 4th is Gasly, but for how long? Because George Russell in the Mercedes is trying to overtake him. They're coming up towards turns 9 and 10 now as well. Russell to the outside, Gasly defends, but that's going to compromise his run all the way down the back straight, and Lance Stroll sees an opportunity now to get involved in this fight. Russell goes to the outside of Gasly, coming down into turn 11, onto the brakes. Gasly's still there, no he's not. Russell is through. Russell up into 4th place, Gasly down to 5th, Stroll in 6th, Hülkenberg, Sainz, Tsunoda and Norris are the rest of the top 10. So I think Tsunoda's running well in 9th place. Perez has got ahead of Logan Sargent and is up into 15th position, but Russell now up into 4th. His next target will be Fernando Alonso.
Alonso not losing too much time anymore to Hamilton. He's only 1.5 seconds back, and he's just kind of lurking. We're on board now with Sergio Perez, moving up past Logan Sargent, the remaining Williams. A pretty easy move into the braking of turn 11. I think with the extra DRS zone, we are seeing overtaking definitely easier than in previous years, so that's had the intended effect. Gives us hope that we might see some shuffling around yet in this race.
Carlos Sainz has made another move. He's got up into 7th position, so he's done well to dispatch Piastri, Norris, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, because those are the kind of drivers that on a circuit you can't overtake. You can kind of get stuck behind and not make progress, but now he's less than a second behind Lance Stroll, so 5th, 6th, 7th. Gasly, Stroll and Sainz is now going to be the fight, and Stroll is pretty close to the back of Gasly, but Gasly's still got the DRS from Russell up ahead, so no moves this time coming down into turn 11, lap 14 of 58.
That Alpine is pretty slippery in a straight line. We saw Russell struggle to get past it. He had to do most of the hard work under the braking, yeah, with the Aston being one of the slower cars in the straight, it's going to be a bit of a battle for Stroll to get past Gasly. They've got Sainz coming up to join the party as well, so it is already forming into a DRS train, the ones that we've been fearing earlier.
The thing is, at some point, well, the question will be whether Russell breaks away from Gasly, and then suddenly Gasly doesn't have the toe. Here comes Sainz again, now on Stroll. He's going to send another decisive move down the inside into turn 3. Sainz is doing a lovely job here this afternoon of climbing back through the field. I think he's impressive, Sainz. I was expecting him to get fairly well beaten by Charles Leclerc when he joined the Ferrari team. I would suggest Leclerc is the #1 driver in that team, but Sainz has races where you go, you know what, pretty good.
Broadly, yeah, I'd agree, but this weekend he's been the guy with the upper hand in the Ferrari camp. I mean, they've both been struggling, but Sainz has usually been the one ahead. We're jumping on board with Perez now, who's behind the Haas of Magnussen, is it? Slips up the inside of turn 9. Magnussen doesn't give it to him that easily, but Perez forces his way past, and he's now up into 14th. But yeah, Sainz impressive. He's oozing confidence on the brakes, and that is what you need to overtake here. You've got 3 big stops around the lap that you can use for this, and he didn't need to be right on the bumper of Stroll to get that move done.
Oscar Piastri has had a bit of contact with Yuki Tsunoda down at the first corner, so that was Tsunoda getting ahead of Piastri. And Norris has now got ahead of Tsunoda, so Norris is up into 9th place. Piastri's now defending really hard from Zhou Guanyu in the fight over 11th. Piastri in the McLaren, Zhou in the Alfa Romeo. Carlos Sainz is now behind Pierre Gasly, a little too far back. Has he made a mistake there? Went a bit deep into 3, I think, and lost a bit of ground to the car ahead now. He's trying to catch and pass Pierre Gasly for 5th position.
Meanwhile, Alonso sets a purple sector 1. He's not hanging around. He's keeping an eye on these 2 in front of him. Verstappen has got a gap of about 3.5 seconds to Hamilton, but Alonso he's always within that 1.5 seconds. He's not managed to get DRS yet, though.
And that's good news for Alonso, because on the restart, Verstappen and Hamilton just completely dropped him. Like, he was nowhere in the mix, and I thought he might be struggling, but he is managing to keep the pace going, Fernando Alonso, in that fight over 2nd position. And then Russell is only a second or so back from Alonso. Then Russell is bringing the DRS train behind. Perez goes to the outside of Zhou, coming into 13 and makes the move. So Perez now up into 13th place, and his next target will be Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. So Ocon's got ahead of Zhou. Lock up on the left front for Perez coming into turn 13. And he managed to get it stopped in the end, but just a little hint of the issues that Perez had yesterday. But he's up into 13th spot and at least making some progress. Lap 17 of 58 in the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Verstappen started on pole, but both Mercedes got him off the start. Russell was ahead of Hamilton with Verstappen in 3rd. Safety car came out, Mercedes gambled with Russell, but then a red flag came out, which ruined Russell's gamble. Verstappen has subsequently overtaken Hamilton and taken the lead of the race. He's 3.6 seconds clear of the Mercedes driver in 2nd position. Alonso is 3rd, Russell is 4th, Gasly is 5th. Weekend breakfast will follow us here on 5 Live in an hour or so, and then Steve Crossman and the gang will be here from midday, bringing you all the build-up to the to the sport this afternoon, including 2 live Premier League commentaries. Now, Hamilton has been fully caught by Alonso in the fight for second place, and a bit of a squirm for Hamilton on the exit of turn 11. So Alonso has reeled Hamilton in and is now within DRS range of the Mercedes driver in second place. Alonso looking for a second place finish, which would be his best of the season and would be the first time he's finished second in a Grand Prix since, crikey, the Hungarian Grand Prix of 2014, where he finished second to Daniel Ricciardo, and retiring is Russell. George Russell is retiring, he's breaking down. Flames licking from the back of the Mercedes powertrain, spitting out of the exhaust. He pulls over at the pit lane exit as the flames now start to get a little higher over that Mercedes, and Russell will be hopping out of that car as quickly as possible. A Mercedes reliability failure, and really a virtual safety car is deployed, and really a failure for George Russell today.
That's going to close the pit lane because he's parked it in pit exit, and there you go, race control confirms pit lane entry closed, so there's not going to be any chance for a quick pit stop under this VSC until they've cleared that car. Getting the fire extinguishers on that now, so a hard day for Russell turns into a horrible one. He's going to walk away from this with nothing after being in the lead on lap 1. Hard one for him to take.
Here is a look at George Russell. He'd already lost power because everyone had caught him up coming down to turn 11, and then the power had just gone. The smoke started to come from the rear of the car. A bit odd at this point that he didn't pit, to be perfectly honest with you, but maybe he was hoping. I mean, he probably can't see the smoke from in the car, and was maybe hoping it was something you could change on the dash and then get going again.
Yeah, all I'd say is if he did know that there was fire starting at the back of that car, probably one of the worst things you could do is bring that car into pit lane, because it's just such a congested area. So if he did know that it was fire, he did the right thing in carrying on past and pulling over to the side. We're just on board with him now. Can't hear anything untoward, but he is definitely already starting to suffer. He was defending into turn 11, and then as he accelerates out, the engine sounds okay, but he's lost power and he's starting to get a little bit of white smoke coming out of the rear.
Yeah, there was nothing sort of sounding catastrophic, was it? But it just sort of lost power and rumbled to a halt. Saw a huge fire yesterday in the Aussie Supercars race at Melbourne, which are these absolute V8 beasts. If I could commentate on any race series in the world, I think it would be the Aussie Supercars. I love them. But yeah, big fire for James Courtney yesterday in the pit lane, and that was at the front of the car, and he dived into the pits, huge extinguish, and that's actually the fire that George Russell was watching during his post-qualifying interview yesterday. James Courtney was fine. Right, virtual safety car is ending, so everybody will pick up the pace. Can anyone be a little sharper than anyone else on the virtual safety car restart? The track is green again. Max Verstappen is leading the way. Hamilton is second, and Alonso will start to put the pressure on Hamilton.
Alonso's pretty quick. Yeah, copy loose, yep. I don't know if his tyres are going to make it all the way to the end.
So that was
we're planning for all eventualities.
So that's the next thing that I was going to say. We're now heading into the second sort of third of this race, and although in theory these tyres should be able to make it all the way, if you're pushing them really hard, they are not infallible in the way that the hard compound was in, say, Jeddah, where they could have gone all day, all night, and it would have been no issue. You still have graining issues, so we could see some people looking to change strategy at this stage, some people looking to start saving the tyres a little bit, and Hamilton clearly a little bit concerned after pushing quite hard at the start of this race to get position over Verstappen. Alonso maybe as well. He doesn't look like he's doing a lot of saving, but that Aston very good in the corners, lots of downforce, so they've been looking pretty well hooked up all weekend. There's a little bit of a gap now between Hamilton and Alonso. Hamilton managed to get a good jump from that VSC restart. It's over a second, so he's broken the DRS for now. Meanwhile, Gasly has got a big train behind him, and he's lost, of course, the DRS from Russell, so it's Sainz, Stroll, Hülkenberg all queuing up behind him to try and take position. And then a bit further back, you've got the same with Tsunoda, who's got Piastri, Ocon, and Perez all within less than a second and a half.
So great fights throughout the field. Verstappen's lead is 2.3 seconds over Lewis Hamilton. Here comes Perez on the back of Ocon, down towards turn 11. Looks to the inside, he's a little far back. And it was a little bit half-hearted there for Perez. I thought he might be sending it in a bit too half-hearted.
Yeah, that was asking for an accident, really. And he was lucky that it was Ocon in front of him, who had absolutely no interest in giving him the apex of that corner. But he's going to have to be a bit more firm next time around. The problem he's got is he is at the back of this DRS train now.
Down towards turn 1. We'll see whether Piastri is able to get ahead of Yuki Tsunoda this time around. Down towards the right-hander they come. Sainz is right up behind Gasly in the fight over 4th position. They're coming to the end of the first sector, and the Ferrari might have a chance of getting Gasly in a moment. Through the left-hander of turn 3 comes Sergio Perez, still trying to fight Ocon for 11th spot. Sainz coming now down into the quick left-right of turns 9 and 10, and then right in the slipstream of Gasly on the run down towards turn 11. Is he going to be close enough for a move into the 90-degree right-hander at the end of the back straight? Not this time around, Carlos Sainz. Right, 2 retirements so far. Oh, and there's a lunge from Perez coming into turn 9. Sent it on Esteban Ocon, and that was bold stuff. And now up ahead of him, Tsunoda is under pressure from Piastri. Piastri to the outside. Perez gets on the power and tries to join the fight. It's 3 cars nose to tail. Now coming through turn 12 and down to the final corner at turn 13 and 14. And is there going to be a move down into turn 1 this time? It doesn't look like it. Actually, if anything, it's Ocon who looks the most racy, up behind Sergio Perez. Perez looking in his mirrors, but Ocon is too far back to make a move. Just watch them down towards turn 3 as well. Perez is moving to turn 9, though. He came from a long way back. But he's just got that extra DRS pace, I guess. Yeah,
both cars in front of him had DRS, but the Alpine starts recharging a little bit earlier, it looks like, and he just dives in at the last minute and manages to get fully alongside and make the move stick. But yeah, he's still less than 3/10 right under the rear wing of Piastri. So that battle rages on. We're now looking at Sainz, who's coming up on the other Alpine of Gasly, and he's got a lot more momentum this time into turn 9. Forces Gasly to the inside, tries to get a better run out, but he just gets a bit of understeer midway through, and he's lost that momentum. Gasly's looking pretty strong through that turn 9 and 10 chicane, and that's helping him with his defence here. Yeah, I thought he'd gone in a bit too deep. Perez has got Piastri now, so Perez is up into 10th position in the Red Bull. Piastri down into 11th spot. 12th is Esteban Ocon. Verstappen still leading the way. Hamilton has managed to stem the attack of Fernando Alonso a little bit. The gap there is 2 seconds, and Perez has got Piastri in the same place coming up the turns 9 and 10, but he's gone to the outside this time. Piastri's covered the inside. Oh, but Perez has sent it round the outside. This is a very nice drive here from Sergio Perez, I have to say. Verstappen is leading, Hamilton is second, 3rd is Alonso, 4th is still Gasly, still holding on from Carlos Sainz, but Sainz knows he needs to get past Gasly, well, ASAP, if he wants any chance of closing in on Alonso and Hamilton. But Gasly's also doing a superb drive at the moment to hold on to 4th position there. Perez is going to be ruining that first lap. He really would have wanted to get another few cars in the opening, either restart really, because he failed to make positions in both. And he's now coming through the field at a decent pace, but it would have been so much easier for him if he was a few positions higher to begin with. Is that a disadvantage for him starting from the pit lane? Oh, and here comes a move for Perez. He goes past Tsunoda now into turns 9 and 10. So Perez now up into 9th. Yeah, good point about the first start. Of course, he did start from pit lane, but the second start, he was on the grid and also failed to make positions. So perhaps a little bit too tentative there, or maybe the gaps just didn't open up for him. But either way, when the cars are bunched up like that on those first laps, it is by far the easiest place to make up position. Sainz going to be close enough this time down into turn 1 and for the fight for 4th place. Not quite this time through, but maybe into turn 3. He's 0.4 of a second back from Pierre Gasly at some point. I think there'll be a lunge from Sainz, and he thought about it that time, but Gasly knew that he was thinking about it
and covered the inside line.
He wanted to go for it there, but Gasly saw it coming and just moved over, not even really defending, he just moved over one car width to the inside to dissuade that kind of last-minute lunge. But Carlos is looking feisty. He's kind of lined him up into turn 3 for a couple of laps now, and he just needs to be that tiny bit closer through turns 1 and 2. But he's had a bit of a gap pull out now. He's more like 8 tenths back at the moment.
Let's head down to Rosanna Tennant, who's in the pit lane for us.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, 3 retirements. Of course, George Russell in the Mercedes, Alex Albon in the Williams, and then Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari out at the very beginning of the race. He's been giving his reaction in the media pen.
Yeah, I mean, turn 1, I took it easy. Turn 3, I wasn't really planning an overtake at first on Lance. Then I saw that he had to brake very early because of Fernando in front that was braking early. So I released the brakes and put myself alongside Lance. And then Fernando had to brake even more, so Lance found himself between me and Fernando. And he couldn't turn in, and we had contact. I'm not pointing the finger on Lance because I think he just had no choice once Fernando slowed down the car the second time. And for me, it was just impossible to see whether Lance was staying behind Fernando or he was just in between, which I obviously didn't think that he was there. So yeah, just extremely frustrating. I mean, it's the worst start to the season ever, really.
Worst start to the season ever, says Charles Leclerc. 6 points after the opening 3 Grand Prix of the season. Carlos Sainz has finally made the move with a beautiful dummy on Pierre Gasly down into turn 3. That is 10 out of 10 from Sainz. I love a dummy.
It was a very late one as well, because they'd already started in the braking zone. He just pulls the car over to the inside at the very last moment, because Gasly, again, he knew that he was close behind, so he just half-heartedly defended it to sort of dissuade him from having a go, but it wasn't enough. He didn't close the door completely.
Remarkable. Great stuff from Carlos Sainz. So he's now up into 4th place. He's 2 seconds back from Fernando Alonso, who's in 3rd. Alonso's only 2.5 seconds back from Hamilton. Verstappen's 6 seconds up the road. That is gone. Perez is now up into 9th position, but he's 5 seconds back from the Norris, Hulkenberg, Stroll queue, but he should be able to close in on that. I think, I don't know, I was going to say 5th is doable for Perez, but 5th is doable at a stretch. I think 7th is doable for sure, but getting Stroll and Gasly, I think, will be a tough one. Very interested to see what Stroll can do now with Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. There's also this great 3-way fight for the final points-paying position. In 10th place, Tsunoda, Piastri and Ocon. It's 7 o'clock here on BBC Radio 5 Live. A very good Sunday morning to you, and this is the Australian Grand Prix. It's just gone 4 o'clock in Australia in the afternoon. The sun getting a little lower in the autumnal Australian sky, and Max Verstappen is dominating this Grand Prix, as you might have expected, to be perfectly honest with you. The Mercedes had the lead early on. There was a red flag after an accident for Alex Albon, but now Hamilton is in 2nd. His main pressure is going to be from a Fernando Alonso behind him in 3rd. Carlos Sainz in 4th in the Ferrari is going to be on the attack as well. Plenty of fighting in the midfield. They're side by side into turns 9 and 10 with Ocon and Piastri, and that was brilliant from Esteban Ocon. He managed to go right around the outside of turn 9 past Piastri. Piastri drops down into 12th, but that was some serious bravery from Esteban Ocon. Jack Aitken.
He put a huge amount of trust in Piastri there. He managed to get fully alongside, even a little bit past Piastri on the outside going into turn 9, thanks to the DRS, but he still had to make sure that he left just enough space, one car width from the inside for Piastri, and they both managed to get through there unscathed, which was impressive. Poor Piastri, he was all over the back of Tsunoda for the last 5 laps or so, trying this way and that, but not quite getting through, and he's now lost out with that lack of momentum to Ocon.
Lap 27 of 58 in the Australian Grand Prix. As I say, that's former Williams reserve driver Jack Aitken alongside myself, Jack Nicholls. Down in the pit lane is Rosanna Tennant, and Max Verstappen is out in front. Later on, Weekend Breakfast will be following us here on 5 Live, and then later on today we've got West Ham versus Southampton at 2 o'clock, the 2 bottom place teams in the Premier League table, and then Newcastle can leapfrog Man United if they beat them later on at St James's Park in the fight for 3rd, and that gets underway at 4:30. Commentary of both here on 5 Live. Esteban Ocon around the outside of Tsunoda now into turns 9 and 10. That was a little bit more straightforward. Tsunoda was fairly defenceless, so now Ocon is up into 10th position. Also, just to bring you up to date, if you had a nice early night, which I presume you did if you're having such an early morning, Anthony Joshua returned to winning ways. He had a unanimous points victory over Jermaine Franklin at the O2 Arena last night. And for all your boxing coverage, make sure you download the 5 Live boxing podcast with Bunsey and the gang to bring you up to date with everything there. Verstappen is leading the Grand Prix. Hamilton is second. Just seen a little replay of a bit of sort of a puff of smoke from the rear of Carlos Sainz's Ferrari. Now, he was running over a curb at the time, and sometimes when you run over a curb, you get a bit of a kick up from the sort of wooden plank on the bottom, but the smoke there tends to be a bit more orangey, and that was quite white. That
looked, definitely from a shift or something going on with the engine. We have seen that before from these cars. It's not to say that it's normal and it's not without concern. But he hasn't had a failure yet. He seems to be okay from it. And I was just looking that Gasly is holding on to the back of that Ferrari pretty admirably with the help of DRS, which is particularly effective around here, it seems. But he's not been dropped by Sainz since that very daring move into turn 3.
Let's head down to the pits. Rosanna Tennant.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, when drivers crash out or retire, we all rush to talk to them in the bullring or the media pen. And I kept an eye out for Alex Albon. He walked past me, through into the hospitality unit. Then he's come out. He's gone into the garage. So I assume he wanted to go and have a chat with the engineers just to talk through what went wrong. He's now gone back to the hospitality area. So he's in absolutely no rush to come and talk to us, or maybe it's just me. And the same goes for George Russell. He hasn't made his way to talk to us yet. So we wait patiently, but no word yet on what really happened there with the power unit for the Mercedes or Alex Albon's crash.
And it's going to be a little bit concerning that for Mercedes, because this is only the third race of the season. You only get a certain amount of parts to use throughout the year, and we were saying that, you know, Ferrari are in trouble because they've changed one of their engines already on all of their Ferrari powered cars. So it could be that if Russell has to change one this early in the season, that's not ideal, and that reliability concern will rumble for the other Mercedes-powered teams, including Lewis Hamilton, who's running in second place. Oscar Piastri now overtaking Yuki Tsunoda around the outside into turn 9, and Piastri gets up into 11th place. His teammate Lando Norris is running well in 8th position in the other McLaren, and Sergio Perez isn't really closing in much. They both did a 1 minute 22.4 on the last lap of the Grand Prix. Perez is in clear air, 4 seconds back from Norris, and he's comfortably about 0.7 of a second slower than his teammate Max Verstappen managed. So Perez isn't closing the gap to Norris and Hülkenberg and Stroll particularly quickly at the moment.
We're now just over the halfway point of this Grand Prix, and as I mentioned earlier, there are still some teams out there, I'm sure, some drivers that are still concerned about the longevity of these mediums. So we might be seeing a little bit of a difference in approach in terms of the saving of that tyre. And even Hamilton, not long ago, we didn't hear it on the radio, but he again voiced his concern, saying that he doesn't think the mediums on his car are going to make it. It seems to have settled down a little bit now in terms of the pace for some of the runners who are trying to eke the most that they can out of these tyres.
We're past the half race distance, lap 30 of 58, and we're comfortably past it in terms of time because of the 15-20 minute red flag period we had to clear the gravel off the circuit after Alex Albon's accident. All the drivers out there, the top 14 are on hard compound tyres, which may be able to get to the end of the Grand Prix. That was sort of the theory when they put them on, but as Jack Aitken was saying, Hamilton uncertain as to whether these would get to the end. And actually on the last lap and a half, Alonso's taken quite a chunk of time actually out of Lewis Hamilton in the fight for second place. The gap's now come down to 1.3 seconds, extends again to 1.6, so it's fluctuating, but it was 0.3 of a second he took out of him on that last lap. Tsunoda is now under pressure from Joe, so sliding backwards in the order a little bit, Yuki Tsunoda, but he's running stronger than his teammate Nick De Vries, who's the last of the runners at the moment after contact on the opening lap.
Those AlphaTauris do not look happy. They're really struggling for pace and Tsunoda just seems to be moving backwards, as you say, and a bit of a rolling roadblock at the moment. And Zhao on the hards is the next up to try and get past him as quickly as he can, and he's got Magnussen queuing up behind him even to be the next in line. So yeah, and he's got DRS heading towards turn 9, but it's a bit of a ways off. He's gaining time, looks like he's going to try and go around the outside, doesn't fancy that, backs out of it, tries to instead go for a bit of a better exit. Wasn't an amazing one though, and he's now defending from Magnussen behind him. It's a three-way battle as they go into turn 11. He holds the inside line. Magnussen still poking his nose up the outside into turn 12, but backs out of it.
Nice little fight there over 12th, 13th and 14th positions. It feels like people are preferring, I should say. Yeah, come on, it's 8 minutes past 7 in the morning in the UK. People are preferring to get the move done into turns 9 and 10 because you try and get the cutback, as it were, the better exit, but I don't know if it's the dirty air or what, but people are getting just unable to get a good run out and then down into turn 11.
Yeah, it's a longer straight on the way into turn 9. Here's Hamilton.
So Alonso 22.4. I think he just keeps trying to push you to use your tyres. Let's not fall for it.
So a bit of mind games being played out here. It is a tactic that is well known and used in the grid now, and Mercedes wise to that one. But Alonso being able to up the pace like that at will is still a pretty good sign, because Hamilton, it seems, is fairly up against it. He clearly thinks that he's doing all he can to get the most out of these tyres, both in terms of pace and longevity. Sainz is not that far back now from these two as well. He's showing pretty decent pace and is steadily creeping up on the back of them. He was just a tenth quicker than Alonso then, but he's bringing with him Gasly and Stroll, who are also not looking too shabby at the moment.
I think when I can't remember the exact gap when Sainz got ahead of Gasly, but it was at least sort of 3 seconds or something that they were back from Hamilton and Alonso. So they've done well to chip that gap away, and as you say, bringing Gasly and Stroll with them. Hulkenberg is running 7th in the Haas, 8th is Norris, 9th is Perez. Perez just set the fastest lap of the race. Suddenly goes 7 tenths quicker than Lando Norris in 8th position. So Perez's lack of making an impact on those midfield drivers maybe was a choice, and just saved his tyres for a little bit. We know he's very good at that, or has been in the past anyway, and maybe now the attack's coming to try and get Norris and Hulkenberg.
Could be that he's looking to create as much of a tyre difference as possible for the end of this race, because if he manages to take care of these tyres better than those around him, it just makes the overtake that much easier than trying to get it done now, relatively early in the stint, when there won't be that much difference. It does make me laugh, Hamilton's engineer telling him, yeah, we're not going to fall for that, are we, mate? And then Hamilton sets his fastest lap of the race.
So gap to Alonso 1.2.
Guys, these can't be on the same strategy as us, mate.
If they were to stop against Lewis, we think they would struggle with the tyres they have available.
So Hamilton basically suggesting there's no way Alonso can be going to the end on these tyres because he's not saving them enough. I don't quite understand Hamilton's logic there, because the Mercedes and the Aston Martins have been pretty well matched for pace this season, and they are lapping about the same pace if they're doing the same strategy.
Yeah, but Hamilton's speaking from the point of view of, I've got clean air, Alonso's right up my chuff in dirty air, and he's pushing me, it feels like, at ease, and that's the thing that's concerning him, I think. But I tend to agree with the engineer. I think that Alonso's wise enough that he's going to be trying everything he can to unsettle Hamilton, force him into a strategy that he doesn't want. And Hamilton definitely concerned, but we've seen this from him before. He voices his concerns and then gets on with the job anyway, doesn't he? So he's probably doing still a very good job of managing those tyres.
That 35 of 58 in the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Weekend breakfast following us. Verstappen's lead is now 9 seconds at the head of the field. He is disappearing and gone, both in terms of this race and potentially in terms of the championship. but Hamilton is running in second, with Alonso 1.4 seconds back from him, and Sainz is now 1.3 seconds back from Fernando Alonso. Another 0.2 of a second that Sainz in the Ferrari chipped away from Fernando Alonso on that last lap, and he's still bringing Gasly with him. Stroll's dropped out of Gasly's DRS range a little, so struggling there. Joe's got ahead of Tsunoda and up into 12th place, and Perez is now just 1.5 seconds back from Lando Norris in the fight over 8th position.
The two fastest cars in the top 10 that time around were the two Alpines. They both set at 21.7, which is only a 10th or 2 quicker than those around them. But still, they're looking very strong, it has to be said. And Gasly now just half a second behind Sainz. So could we see him try and get back past the Ferrari at some stage? But we're now looking at a battle a bit further back in the field. It's the Haas of Magnussen, who's really close now to Tsunoda, who's been passed finally by Zhao. And it looks like Tsunoda's going to lose another position here. They run towards turn 9, DRS open for Magnussen, and he jumps to the inside. Fairly simple move, so that's the misery complete for Tsunoda as he drops into clean air behind him.
Lap 36 of 58. Verstappen leading, Hamilton second, Alonso third, Sainz fourth, Gasly fifth, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Norris, Perez and Ocon the rest of the top 10. Piastri outside the top 10 at the moment in 11th place. Joe, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Bottas, Sargent and De Vries. The 17 drivers still running out there. Sargent's putting Bottas under quite a bit of pressure for 15th position. Not been a strong race this at all for Valtteri Bottas. He's a long way from his teammate Zhou Guanyu. After qualifying at the back yesterday, did start from the pit lane, but we've had a safety car intervention and a restart since then. Lap 36 of 58. If you heard a few big cheers and screams there, that was because they just showed Daniel Ricciardo on the big screens around the circuit, which the fans rather enjoyed. The Aussie hero not racing this year, reserve driver for the Red Bull squad. Lap 36 of 58. Verstappen leading.
Perez is with a sort of a string of fast laps is an exaggeration, but he's definitely up the pace again after taking a little bit of a break, it seemed, on his tyres, and he's inching up to the back of Norris now, just around 1.5 seconds off. But the pace in general in the top 5, top 10 has increased. They're now, many of them, lapping in the high 21s, where previously it was a 22 flat or low 22s, so everyone, as the fuel burns off, just starting to press on these tyres a little bit more again. We're heading with 20 laps to go now in this Grand Prix.
And they're all closing in on Hamilton. Alonso now just 1 second back from Hamilton. Took 4 tenths out of him on that previous lap. So the gap now a second between Hamilton in second and Alonso in third. And then it's only 1.2 seconds back to Carlos Sainz in fourth. It's less than a second to Gasly in fifth. So they're all kind of concertinaing up towards the back of Hamilton in second place. Kevin Magnussen has sent an absolute lunge down into turn 11 to pass Joe, and he's pulled it off. Nicely done from Magnussen. He was miles away.
Very clean, very well done. We see a pit stop there for the remaining Williams for the race, Logan Sargent, so he's going to drop even further back into final position on track of the remaining runners. He's gone onto the hard compound from the mediums that he restarted the race with, and he's going to come out just a few hundred meters ahead of race leader Verstappen.
Yeah, Sargent and De Vries were two drivers that put the medium tyre on after the red flag for whatever reason, and they've committed to the two-stop strategy. Here comes Hamilton across the line again. He sets the fastest lap of the race. So now Pete Bonington, we heard him earlier on saying, let's not fall for Alonso trying to push us. They've thought now, right, we've got to push because everybody's closing in on him if he's just sitting here managing his tyres. 21 laps to go.
Quick behind, mate.
Hamilton saying these guys are quick behind, mate. They certainly are. Hamilton in second in the black Mercedes, coming under the tree-shadowed run towards the right-hander of turn 6. 4:15 in Melbourne as they race around the Albert Park Lake.
It's very hard to discern from the outside, just based on pace alone, how much of the tyre driver is using. We know Hamilton can be very efficient with his tyres, that is being quick and, you know, keeping some life in them. But setting fastest sectors, fastest laps. Alonso keeping pace behind him and actually set a purple sector 1 on this very lap and is closing up by a couple of tenths again. But it's it's going to be interesting to see if they can hold this pace or if they're all pushing themselves closer and closer to the brink of another pit stop. But it's getting to be too late for that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sargent's just come in with 20 laps to go. They come across the line. Sargent came in for a set of hard tyres with 20 laps remaining. We were expecting on the, well, those who started on the mediums, the anticipation was around lap 15 to 20 to pit for the mediums. So it's probably not impossible for them to pit, but it's just a big... You got to take the gamble. I think that's the issue, and no one's got enough clear space behind them in order to take that gamble. And then B, look, if you pit with 20 laps to go, you lose 20 seconds. You need to be a second a lap quicker to catch back up and then overtake and then retake the position. So it's whether you think you're going to have that much of a pace offset.
I think it is feasible with the surface overheating that we see, and it does seem to be a lot easier to overtake with this new layout. The bigger issue for a lot of teams might be that, do they have any fresh mediums left? The medium is vastly preferable to the soft because the soft grains very quickly, but most of them would have started on a medium set, and some of them even, as we saw, restarted on the mediums. Not sure which cars will have a fresh set remaining. We can do a little bit of digging to find that out for you. Meanwhile, Hamilton yet again going purple in sector 1, so he was actually 2.5 times quicker than race leader Verstappen and pulled out a bit of a gap to Alonso. But it's ebbing and flowing, this gap between Hamilton and Alonso. Alonso sort of lets it go out to 1.6, 1.7 and then closes it back down to 1.2 again. But Hamilton's not really managing to make a lasting impact here. And in the meantime, Sainz, Gasly and Stroll have pulled up to the back. So it is a train now, with Gasly being the closest to the car in front of him, just 7 tenths behind Sainz for 4th and 5th place.
Coming into this race, Russell and Hamilton had 2 new sets of mediums available, so they do have a new set, and they were the only 2 other than Sargent and Albon, and we've seen Sargent use his second set of mediums. So it's only Russell and Hamilton, so it's only Hamilton because Russell's out of the Grand Prix, that has a new set of medium tyres remaining. Now they can go on to a new set of hards also if they had a new set of hards, but I think everybody, only Verstappen and Perez have 2 new sets of hards available. So it's a tricky one if they want to pit again. Verstappen across the line does the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, gapping up to 10 seconds up at the front. Hamilton has managed to gap Alonso a little, so it extends to 1.7 seconds. Alonso to Sainz is extended to 1.5 seconds. Gasly is still in the slipstream of Carlos Sainz. This is comfortably the best performance we've seen from Alpine so far this season. 8th is their best result in the last race with Esteban Ocon, 8th, and Gasly 9th. Gasly was 9th in the opening 2 races of the year, but he's running now in 5th position on a very strong run, and still sticking with Sainz.
Gasly will be regretting giving up that position. He didn't give it up easily, but it was definitely defendable if he'd taken the threat from Sainz a little bit more seriously, because such is the pace that he's shown since then. He would have been able to hold on to that position, I think, and he's been the one that's been running closest to the car in front of him for some time now. He's been within a second of Sainz for most of the previous 10 laps, whereas many of the cars around him hover around the 1.5 second mark. So he's pretty comfortable running in the dirty air of that Ferrari, which shows a good underlying pace for the Alpine.
Lap 41 and 58. The Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. That's Jack Aitken, the former Williams reserve driver, alongside myself, Jack Nicholls, and down in the paddock, we've got Rosanna Tennant.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I've just been speaking to George Russell, who has finished his race here in Melbourne. He had a brilliant start, taking the lead off Max Verstappen. Then he decided to pit under the safety car, which of course turned into the red flag, which severely compromised his strategy and pushed him down to P7. Then his power unit gave out. I asked George if he had any idea that his engine was about to fail.
Just had decided slowing down, and I was flat out on the throttle when the car wasn't accelerating. I saw a puff of smoke in my mirrors, and that was game over. So such a shame. I mean, it was a shame to be in that position in the first place following the red flag. I felt like that was totally unnecessary, the same way as I felt the safety car last week in Saudi was totally unnecessary. So I don't really know what is going on with some of these decisions in the race control. But, that was sort of history at that point. Got our head down, made up 3 positions, closing in on Fernando, and game over. So, yeah, obviously very disappointed to be stood here.
Quite a lot of positives for Mercedes to take away in terms of the performance of their car this weekend, but I think the big problem for them is that Red Bull, according to George, are not running at full tilt. He thinks that they are not showing their hand, Jack, because they worry that the sport will try and compromise them. So I think the gap you're seeing on screen between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton is even bigger than we could even imagine.
Yeah, of course, that's very interesting. So sort of sandbagging effectively is Russell's kind of suggestion. I'm not. I can't remember the safety car that he's talking about in Saudi Arabia. Oh, when Lance Stroll pulled off. That was a weird one actually, because he pretty much pulled completely off the circuit. That was an odd safety car. I do accept that one.
It was a GPS error, wasn't it? Race control make their decision a lot of the time based on the GPS of where the cars are, and they believed that Stroll was still on track and still a threat, as it were.
Right.
But yeah, agreed. You can just look at the CCTV cameras, and that should be a fairly simple fail-safe. So understandable frustration there for George. But
the red flag today, I'm less offended by, because there was gravel all over the circuit that kind of didn't. I'm not a big fan of. We need to sweep every little drop of gravel. Here comes Sergio Perez. He's making a move on Lando Norris to the inside at turn 9, and Perez has closed the gap to Norris and now made the overtake. Perez up into 8th place. His next target will be Nico Hülkenberg. The Red Bull climbing up through the order now. 15 laps to go.
Norris didn't really fight that one, did he? He sort of just gave up the inside to turn 9 and said, yeah, sure, I guess you're quicker. It was a bit of a lackluster defence, but Perez took his time cutting that gap down and sort of just chipped away at it and finally got there. Seeing a replay, yeah, fairly straightforward, to be fair to Norris. He almost certainly would have been able to do the move around the outside, even if he hadn't given up the inside line there. So Perez looking pretty strong still in these closing stages, and as you say, heading for Hülkenberg now.
Yeah, the red flag today wasn't too egregious from my personal perspective, because there was gravel all over the circuit as well. And I get that behind the safety car, in theory, you should be able to, but they had about 30 marshals on circuit sweeping the gravel away.
The other thing is we still don't have an answer on if it was barrier damage, and that's always one that requires bigger machinery, more intense work to correct, and there's obviously quite a serious safety issue. So if that was the case, completely understandable with the red flag. But yeah, if it wasn't and it was just gravel, yeah, it's a bit more 50-50. But
and you can see why Russell would be frustrated, because it was the first thing that looked like it was going to ruin his race before his race got properly ruined. Here comes Perez now on the back of Hülkenberg, down into turn 11 to the inside, and Perez gets through. So Perez now up into 7th position. He is 4 seconds back from Lance Stroll with 14 laps to go. So this is going to be the challenge for Perez. 7th place was doable and looked quite sort of straightforward. Getting up into 5th, well, 4th is potentially on the cards, because of the distance between all of those drivers in 4th, 5th and 6th, but it's going to be a little bit tougher for Perez, I think, with 14 laps to go. Now Norris is trying to make a move on Hülkenberg, coming down into turn 3, but he's not quite close enough, and Hülkenberg at the moment has DRS because he's close enough to Perez. Soon he won't. Lap 45 of 58.
The McLaren doesn't look the raciest car out there. Both Norris and Piastri have struggled to get moves done. I'm not sure if it's because of straight line speed or if they're suffering a bit more than others in dirty air. You do get differences in how cars behave there. But Norris again in DRS coming towards turn 9. Within striking distance, you would have thought of the Haas, but Haas still, of Hülkenberg, still has DRS, so doesn't really get any closer. It doesn't look the fastest car in a straight line, that McLaren.
No, really struggled to get past Logan Sargent last time in Saudi Arabia, did Lando Norris. So, yeah, real struggle for the McLaren team at the moment. 9th and 11th is not a bad performance for them, to be honest. And if Norris gets ahead of Hülkenberg, that will be well, not quite best of the rest, actually, because the Alpine of Gasly's up there in 5th place, and those were the two teams battling over 4th in the championship last year, and I think Alpine have very much got the jump there, and Aston Martin have got the jump on all of them. The gap between Hamilton and Alonso, 1.3 seconds. Sainz has dropped back now, 2.3 seconds back from Fernando Alonso. So that sort of charge from Sainz has eased off a little. And Perez isn't breaking the DRS of Hülkenberg and Norris here, which is a bit of a surprise.
Well, like I said, he did take his time getting up to the back of this pair, and although once he got there, he got the moves done pretty comfortably with the straight line advantage of that Red Bull. I think the inherent pace isn't massive from Perez. He's got a 4.3 second gap to Stroll ahead of him. It'll be interesting. He's got just over 10-11 laps to go. He may struggle to close that, and I don't know if he's metering himself and really saving the tyres and going for a bit of a sprint in the last laps, but yeah, he's doesn't look like it to me.
Max Verstappen sets his personal best lap of the race so far, and it is only 6 thousandths slower than Sergio Perez's best lap of the Grand Prix. So at the moment, Perez would be getting... Well, no, Alonso sets the fastest lap of the race, takes 4 tenths out of Lewis Hamilton. The gap just 1 second as they come across the line. So Alonso putting the hammer down now, but we've seen it so many times this season, that ebbing and flowing... so many times this race, that ebbing and flowing between Hamilton and Alonso, where you think, right, here comes the attack from Alonso, and then it doesn't quite manage to stick. But they have both dropped Carlos Sainz a little. There was a time when Sainz, Gasly and Stroll were all charging up to the back of Hamilton. Stroll has actually dropped off the back of Sainz and Gasly here as well. So a bit of a struggle for Stroll in this Grand Prix.
Yeah, Gasly still within a second of Sainz, and that DRS flap's going to be pretty exhausted by the end of this race, but he's not been able to get close enough, even with Sainz not having DRS, to mount a challenge yet. We'll see. He's now half a second behind Sainz even, so very close to the Ferrari.
Down into turns 9 and 10. And Verstappen's had a spin. I think Verstappen's had a spin coming out of turn...
just gone wide, perhaps?
Or turn 13. He was weaving around. He lost 3 seconds at the end of that lap. So maybe he's just run wide and got onto the grass, Max Verstappen. He's still in the lead of the Grand Prix, but his advantage went from 11 seconds down to 8. What happened here? Coming through the right-hander... Well, he's coming to the left-hander of turn 13. The slow left, and just sends it in too deep. Locks the left front and ends up on the grass.
I keep front locking there. It's really...
Okay, understood.
So he says he keeps locking up the front left at that penultimate corner. The slow left-hander of turn 13 rejoins the circuit and carries on his way.
I mean, when you have a 11-second gap, then it's a luxury, isn't it? You can make mistakes like that and get away with it. But he was fairly calm coming back on there, and the biggest moment he had was getting on the gas on the grass and getting a bit of a kick from the rear as he tried to come back on, but no major dramas. He take his time cleaning the debris off his tyres and getting back up to speed, but he's still got just under 8 seconds gap ahead of Hamilton, so no major issue, no worry for Verstappen there. Now we're still looking at the gap between Sainz and Gasly. They're still keeping things relatively stable between the top 5 there, and Alonso still 1.3, 1.5 seconds off of the back of Hamilton. I don't know if he's got what it is going to take to get really up close and mount a challenge. Meanwhile, Norris and Hülkenberg are having a great scrap through the final sector. Norris getting right up behind the rear wing, very, very close to contact as they head back out onto the main straight. He's going to have DRS going into turn 1, not close enough to mount a challenge, but if he sets himself up well here to get a good exit, then he'll have a great chance into turn 3.
Here they come then down the second straight on this Albert Park circuit, bursting in and out of the sunlight and the shadow from the trees on the left-hand side, past the swimming pool, and then they turn left past the old football stadium on the right-hand side. Big twitch from Lando Norris.
He's pushing that McLaren very hard because he knows that the advantage he has over Hülkenberg is in the twisty stuff. Once they get out onto the straight and stretch their legs, he doesn't have the firepower to breeze past the Haas, so he has to get that gap as small as possible on the exit of these corners.
Here they come towards turns 9 and 10. Very quick left and a right. taken at 140 miles an hour, the quick left right, and Norris was really good through there, and now he's going to be on the attack. Hulkenberg covers the inside just as Norris was going for it. That was sort of a late defence from Hulkenberg, but it was almost they both went for the inside at the same time, and Norris not able to make the move there.
That's a real shame. Norris was absolutely brilliant through turns 9 and 10 in the dirty air of the Haas. His car squiggling and moving all over the place, but keeping the gap down, doing exactly as I said and trying to minimise that gap. We're going to go on board with him now. There's a little kick from the rear as he exits turn 10, but a great run on the Haas. He goes to dummy from outside to inside.
He moved after I moved. We're on it.
And yeah, complaining that the Haas of Hulkenberg was reacting to him dummying back to the inside, but it's good. I'd be very surprised if Hulkenberg gets a penalty because his move was very subtle to the inside and he was already defending.
And he was already up because the track kinks to the right there, and he was right up to the right-hand side and just sort of kept it to the right, whereas Norris expected him to come open again.
Good job, hang in there.
Hang in there is the message to Hulkenberg. An 8th place for Haas would be a good result for them. They've only got 1 point so far this season. That was from a 10th place finish last time out in Jeddah for Kevin Magnussen.
It would be a deserved points haul as well, because Hulkenberg's been brilliant this weekend. He's been hauling that Haas up to the front, but here comes Norris again. He's got another run on the exit of turn 10, dives to the outside on the braking of turn 11, goes for the switchback, but he hasn't got the traction to make it work.
Hulkenberg holding on to 8th place. It's going to be a long final 8 laps for Nico Hulkenberg. Up at the front, Alonso's 1.5 seconds back from Hamilton. Verstappen's leading the Grand Prix by 8 seconds, but then it's 1.5 seconds back to Alonso in third, 3.7 seconds to Sainz in fourth. Gasly has actually dropped out of DRS range of Sainz for the first time this race. So this battle for 8th is on, and it would also be McLaren's first points of the season. It's been a long time since they failed to score in the opening 2 races of the season. I think it was back in 2016 or 17, the disastrous Honda years. But Norris is really putting the pressure on Hulkenberg now for 8th place. Weekend Breakfast will follow us at the top of the hour here on 5 Live. 5 Live Sport getting underway from 12 o'clock to Premier League commentaries this afternoon. Both kind of 6-pointers, really. Bournemouth versus West Ham versus Southampton, and then Newcastle Man United. Norris goes to the outside again, tries to get the cut back again, and he's got a much better run this time. Got the traction coming through. They're side by side into 13, and off onto the gravel goes Hulkenberg. Norris makes the move up into 8th place, and a really strong move from Lando Norris. Gets the McLaren up to 8th, Hulkenberg down to 9th. There was a spirited defence from Hulkenberg, but Norris managed to get that traction and get the run into turn 12. Good stuff.
That was full commitment from from both drivers. Norris had a good run again on the exit of turn 10, but had to pressure Hulkenberg into making that mistake on the exit. We're going to go on board with Norris now. He cuts back, same as before, but this time Hulkenberg gets a little bit of wheel spin, and he gets up onto the rear corner, slides down the inside of turn 12, and Hulkenberg, he tries to hang on around the outside, but it is not a corner where you can do that, sadly, and he just skips over the gravel on the exit. And full points for effort, but yeah, he had to submit there in the end.
Max Verstappen leading the Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton in 2nd place. The round of applause from the McLaren garage as Lando Norris made that move and got up into 8th. Joe is fighting Kevin Magnussen for 12th position. It doesn't look as though Oscar Piastri is going to get his first Formula 1 World Championship points at his home Grand Prix, because he's in 11th place, 12 seconds off the back of Esteban Ocon at the moment. Verstappen's advantage up at the front, 8.3 seconds to Hamilton. Hamilton 1.5 seconds ahead of Fernando Alonso. Sainz in 4th, Gasly 5th, Stroll, Perez, Norris, Hulkenberg and Ocon is the rest of the top 10. Do we think there's a little late attack coming from Fernando Alonso in that fight over 2nd position? Because every so often he'll do a burst and get to a 2nd back from Hamilton, but then drop away again.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, their pace is getting closer and closer to each other and more consistent as we get closer to the end. Alonso did do a personal best on that last lap, but it was only 2 tenths quicker than Hamilton, so I think he's starting to run out of options here. Likewise, Perez checking back in on him, still in P7, 2.5 seconds behind Stroll, and I'm not sure he's closing him at a quick enough rate. He might get to the back of the Aston Martin before the end of the race, but of course overtaking him will be another matter. And something bouncing off the back of... Has Hulkenberg lost a wheel?
Yes, Hulkenberg's lost his right rear wheel. Sorry, it's Magnussen. Magnussen's lost his right rear wheel. Now, this is something that has happened to Haas quite often in Melbourne.
It's just the tyre.
But it's just the tyre. The wheel's still on. Looks like Gilles Villeneuve in 1979 at Zandvoort. So there's a bit of a niche reference for you, but Magnussen's pulling off at the side of the circuit. So where's his tyre gone? It's in the middle of the back straight, so this could be a very, very late safety car here.
Or just a virtual safety car, perhaps. I mean, he's on the inside of turn 4. He's quite close to an overlap where the marshals could pull him through.
You got damage. Rear suspension is broken.
Rear suspension is broken. So has he maybe tapped the wall somewhere, Magnussen?
He must have done, because the outer flange of the rear wheel has just sheared off. So it must have been on the exit of, is that turn 2?
Yeah, so exit of turn 2, Magnussen has tapped the wall, and that has taken the rear, and the safety car deployed.
I think you can see there's shards of wheel basically on the exit of turn 2 there. The drivers are going to have to be very careful picking their way through that to not pick up a late puncture. It's even more treacherous for them now at the end of the life of their hard tyre, because they've worn through a lot of the rubber on that tyre, so it's even thinner casing than it would be at the beginning of its life.
Maybe Oscar Piastri could do a pit stop, whack a set of soft tyres on and go for a late attack. I don't think anyone else really has a big enough advantage to pit. Also, we're on lap 55 of 58 now, so the race could end behind the safety car. Mercedes are getting are in the pits for Hamilton if he does come in, but I can't see that they would pit Hamilton. He's just come down the start-finish straight, so he won't be pitting Lewis Hamilton. We might not even get a restart, to be perfectly honest.
It should be, maybe we'll have one lap to go, because Magnussen did the considerate thing and parked up quite close to an opening in the barriers for the marshals. He also
deposited his tyre right by a marshal's post as well, which was
kind of him.
Very convenient.
We're on board now with the rear-facing camera of the Haas. He flies through turn 1, gets on the curb, and he's not really...
Oh, wow. That's lame.
That's really strange. Is that just a lapse in concentration from Magnussen? Because he wasn't wide out on the dirt or anything. Just gets too close to the barrier. Because there's before you get to the exit curb, the barrier is right up against the track, and then it opens up and gives you a bit more curb to play with. But he just drives into it.
I mean, yeah, he has just kind of driven into the wall, Kevin Magnussen. Without being too harsh, we're just seeing him coming out of... he didn't have a moment, he just...
That's
was just chilling.
Yeah, it's not a mistake that you usually see from Magnussen, but... yeah, it does get very dirty offline at this circuit, so it's possible that as he got closer to the wall, he just realised too late that the trajectory wasn't right, and it was too late to do anything about it. But yeah, very strange.
Well, safety car deployed. That's Jack Aitken alongside myself, Jack Nicholls. Here's Hamilton.
So much debris out here. Okay, copy. Yeah, just pick your way through.
That's Hamilton saying there's so much debris out here as the sparks flew from underneath Magnussen's car, and the tyre shards went all over the place. But that's Hamilton basically said, red flag. Got a red flag.
Wow, that's a bold decision by race control.
Well, that is... Well, this... So... Right. We're getting 2021 flashbacks here, basically.
Don't say it.
Yeah, because, well, the reason that... Well, but actually earlier in 2021 with Baku, wasn't it, where they red flagged the race. I'm fully up for this. Red flag the race in order to get a racing finish. Pause the race for like 5 minutes, clear the track, and then we get 2 laps of racing at the end. I am fully up for that. And the argument was, this is what should have happened when Nicholas Latifi ended up in the barriers at the end of 2021.
Yes, so this is more in line with the new procedure, I say in air quotes, but This is going to be really interesting because Verstappen on both starts has looked pretty weak, and it's you know, if they had a chance to do an easy fix, they would have done it for the second start, which suggests to me that it isn't going to be an easy fix. Maybe he's going to struggle again.
So Hamilton could win this Grand Prix all of a sudden
if he can defend for the 2 laps following the start.
Yeah. Wow. Well.
Will they get DRS for the final lap?
No, I wouldn't have thought so. So I think it will be a 2-lap race because we're on lap 56 here. They've just taken the timing beam. They go round, so I think they start the race on lap 57.
Yes.
And then another lap 58.
It'll be once past the start finish and then the checkered flag. Yes.
Goodness me. Crikey. Another red flag in the Australian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Rosanna, just when you think it's all quietening down.
I was just packing up to go home. I'm here still. Do you know what? I think this is bad news for Max Verstappen. I think when we had that second restart, I thought, oh dear, didn't go well for him the first time we started this race an hour and 3/4 ago. I think Red Bull have got some concerns over their gearbox, reliability issues. We've heard them talking about the drive shaft in Saudi. Could this be a real problem for Max Verstappen? So close now to the end of this race. Could he lose it in these next few laps?
Well, presumably they'll all put some soft tyres on at this because you can change tyres during the red flag. They'll all put some soft tyres on and just go for it.
They should all have a fresh set because it is the unfavoured race tyre, so very few people have used the soft tyre so far in this race. We'll see if we can dig up that information, but Verstappen straight up to his pit wall and having a chat with Jonathan Wheatley, who's the man in contact with race control, and I think we can all have a good guess as to the questions he's firing in their direction at the moment, but the fact is he's going to have to deal with it now. The straight line advantage of the Red Bull over the Mercedes is such that even without DRS, he definitely can make a move if he loses the place off the start. So, you know, it's not game over here for Verstappen. He's shown how much of a pace advantage he's got in the race so far. But, yeah, this is definitely a complication that you wouldn't have seen coming.
Not many. Here's some old team radio. Here's Verstappen.
Red flag, drive directly to the pits, do not stop in the box, stay in the fast lane.
You need red flag.
Here's Alonso.
Red flag's to slow down.
What?
Yep, red flag. 1 lap, 2 laps.
Here's Hamilton.
Will they restart this?
I can imagine they will.
So, everyone wants an existential conversation about Formula One at 7:45 in the morning. I look from a...
Hit me with it, Jack, come on.
So, well, what do you think? From a sporting point of view, like the race in the olden days, this would have finished under safety car because something comes out at the something happens at the end of the race. Safety car comes out. You can't. The reason for this red flag is for the show, in inverted commas. So we get a race that finishes under racing conditions, and not a lame race that finishes under red flag or safety car. I think the 2009 Grand Prix, the famous Button Barrichello Brawn race, finished under the safety car because of a late crash for Sebastian Vettel and Robert Kubica. And we've seen many times a race finish under safety car, and it is a bit meh. So the FIA, F1, whoever, kind of decided between them, we want to have racing finish under green. That's why Michael Massey hurried through all of those, or only half of or didn't follow the procedure correctly at the end of Abu Dhabi. The reason was so that the championship would finish with racing rather than under a safety car condition. So I get it, but all the drivers are a bit like, well, what? This is a pointless red flag.
Because they're not used to it. This is just something that Formula One isn't used to. The fact is, in other series around the world, particularly in America, where they are more focused on the show aspect, this is a practice that's been common for decades. And yeah, in the past, race will resume at 4:56 local time, which is in 10 minutes, race control says. In the past, we would have either seen it end up under a safety car, or even as Hamilton was asking, is this going to continue? Sometimes they would have just called it and said, yeah, we're so close to the end of the race, we're not going to clean this up quick enough, But like you, I'm a fan of this. The bit that I'm a little bit undecided about is the changing of tyres under a red flag. That I'm not sure I'm completely on board with, and it's something that's been raised by teams and drivers in the past. In this case, I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on the race result, but of course in the past, when strategies were more diverged, it can have a huge effect. So I think all for having the show go on with a standing restart and having a final 2-lap shootout, but yeah, the tyres being changed, I'm less sure about.
I think that the other thing that I I think there should be some kind of shorter red flag period. I think that's the other thing that could really help, in that they have to, by rules, they have to give a 10-minute warning and all of that kind of stuff. And I think there's an argument that, you know, there should be like an orange flag, let's call it, where the race is suspended, but everyone stays in their cars and everyone just kind of waits, because these cars now, you can turn them off. Most of them, I think now you can fire them up from within the car, so they can just park in the pit lane, chill out, no one can touch the car, no one can change anything, and then we just fire them up and away we go. And I don't see why that couldn't happen.
Yeah, in other series it's quite common for a red flag. You're not allowed to touch the car, as you say. Mechanics cannot do any work apart from safety items, basically, so keeping the brakes cool and putting a fan in for the engine to not heat soak too much. But you cannot touch the car, and you know, we're looking at pictures of the Red Bull, and there's 7-8 mechanics all over it trying to check every surface, make sure that the tyres are up to temperature. They've got the dry ice in there to cool down the engine as much as possible, so it's a completely different setup. I do think the teams still need that 10-minute warning, more from a logistical point of view than anything else, because even though you can start the car up at the push of a button using the MG UK these days, they're still pretty complex machines. And yeah, I think if we just cut out all of the work on the cars, that would be ideal.
In the Formula E World Championship, they can add laps for time behind the safety car, but that's because behind the safety car you don't use any of your battery energy, so you can just extend the race, whereas here they will be fueled to a certain level. Yes, you save fuel behind the safety car, but I don't think if they added another 3 laps on after the safety car, you wouldn't have enough.
I think you could do it. You save so much fuel on. So to give you an idea, if they use, I don't know, say they use 100% of fuel on a racing lap, on a safety car lap you could use as little as 10%. So,
really? Is it that little?
Yes, so they definitely could do that and add the fuel saving element back into it. Of course, the reason that Formula E do it is because the energy save is such a massive part of the racing. For Formula 1, you could argue it's less critical, but it would definitely add another dynamic to it.
Yeah, but in the regulations, a Formula 1 race is, I can't remember now, 300 kilometres, and that is the sort of rule. So
very traditional.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the question is, Andrew on hashtag BBC F1 says, the late red flag is a desire to put on a show, not to respect the fairness of the 56 laps that preceded it. Is it going to be unfair if Hamilton wins this race?
Newsflash, racing isn't fair. And it never will be completely
life's
fair.
Not fair.
Life's not fair. No, I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean that this is sport. In sport isn't necessarily always fair, and you know that's on purpose, because we're here at the end of the day for entertainment. And I think, you know, if you wanted to be truly fair, you could have a red flag and say, okay, well, Verstappen, you got a 10-second head start, and the rest of you start
like gladiators. You will start on my first whistle.
But you accept that as part of the sport when you get in these cars and you sign up for this job. So yeah, there's a line that you don't want to cross in terms of making it, you know, having the issues that we had in 2021, of course. But I don't think we're crossing that here. I think it's completely fair to say we've neutralised the race for safety reasons. We're going to get going again, and it's going to be a race to the end.
Yeah. I'm not against this. Those of you who are waiting for weekend breakfast might be against it, because we might be a little later going to Chris and Ellie, but Chris and Ellie get less work to do, so they're going to love it. It's great.
Yeah, everyone wins. But I mean, coming back to this point about fairness, you know, if you really want to extend that out, you know, they should let George Russell back into the race and say, oh, you'll get all your laps back, and we'll slot you in, let's say, in 7th place, because that's where you were when you had that bad luck. Yeah, and it's just not how we. It's not how you go racing. Yeah. It's not how the game is played, and that's not just F1 and racing. It's across the world. So you have to accept a little bit of jeopardy there.
Can't just give people their laps back. It's not IMSA.
Hey, I'm not going to hear a bad word about IMSA.
Jack Aitken, everybody, won the famous 12 Hours of Sebring a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it has been now.
So is that your biggest thing? Well, no, you raced in F1, so I guess that was probably the biggest.
I didn't win though. If I had won in a Williams, that would be the biggest.
That would have been quite cool. Yeah.
No offense to Williams, I love you guys, but still, it was a big one. And actually, it's relevant to this conversation because the manner in which I won it was from a 3-car pile up in front of me, where the leaders all had a big crash. And while that bit was not necessarily the unfair bit, the ensuing caution and the reshuffling that IMSA do, where they give people back laps, they let you pit at a certain time to make sure that strategy can be respected, effectively meant that I only had one challenger in the final laps, and it was a relatively easy win. So every series has their own approach at the end of the day, and F1 are changing that approach in recent years. That's why we're seeing a lot of backlash, because everyone, has to get used to it, and change is always difficult. But I think it is positive, the direction that F1 has taken this.
So race will be getting back underway in a little under 3 minutes' time. That is Jack Aitken, former F1 driver for Williams and Sebring 12 Hours winner a couple of weeks ago. In the pit lane is Rosanna Tennant, host of BBC Radio Norfolk's flagship motoring show.
I was going to say, my credentials are a little less sparkly than Jack Aitken's.
I think it's strong, isn't it?
You.
People can listen to straight talk on...
Stop, it's Racing Talk, not Straight Talk. What are you on? Racing Talk, yes, you can listen on BBC Sounds. We've got some star guests on that show, I tell you. Jack Nicholls has even been on.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you know what? I've had some star guests in the media pen. I had Alex Albon just now. I was talking to him about this red flag, and he thinks it's unnecessary. So that's his thoughts. But then I spoke to K-Mag, Kevin Magnussen, who caused the red flag. He said, I don't even know what's going on. I've been on the back of a scooter. What he did tell me is that he didn't even feel the impact. So a bit of a strange one for Kevin, but he said it was enough to crack the rim. So he had sort of black brake dust all over his face. He looks like he's been through the wars. But I think both drivers, perhaps when they review the footage, they might think more along the Alex Albon opinion. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see what all the other drivers have to say about it when they do finally finish this race.
The thing is, the other thing is with motorsport is if you made motorsport fair, then the fastest driver would just win, and
the best team and driver would win all the time, and that's not sport. I want to get away from this language. We're not saying that it has to be unfair and that this is unfair, but it's right. I'm saying that fairness isn't a concept which you should hang up your hat in sport. And I think we're already going to be seeing the backlash on Twitter after this race. Inevitably there will be a lot of you that disagree, and that's okay, but I really do feel that this is sport. It's fair enough, and that's the critical thing. We've reached a threshold that I think is more than acceptable, and this is what the fans are coming here for. They want to see an opportunity for a race restart like this. There was enough debris and shrapnel on the track to warrant the cleanup and the red flag, and to make sure that we got a race restart and didn't end under a safety car. So that's why we're in favour of it. And
this could be one of the classics. We could be about to see one of the classic finishes to a Formula One Grand Prix instead of a pretty lame one.
They've got equal machinery in terms of the tyres that are on the car. They're all going to head out on softs. Red Bull's weakness this whole weekend, the only weakness they've shown is the race restart. Could they be punished for that? Maybe. We'll see.
Right, safety car making its way back out onto the circuit then, and Max Verstappen will be starting this 2-lap sprint from pole position in the Red Bull. He's the championship leader. He will at the moment extend his championship lead quite considerably over Sergio Perez. Currently Perez has the fastest lap of the race. Currently the gap is 1 point, but if it finishes like this, then it will go up to 10 points in Verstappen's favour. So not a huge jump, to be fair, because Perez has made his way back up into 7th place. Verstappen is weaving dramatically left to right, and the reason this is quite big is because Verstappen started on pole position at the very start of this Grand Prix 2 hours ago, but lost the lead. The Mercedes that started in second got ahead of him. And then the other Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton got ahead of him down into turn 3. And then at the second restart, after an earlier red flag for a crash for Alex Albon, Verstappen didn't get a good getaway. I think he kept his place, didn't he, on the second restart? But it wasn't a good getaway for Verstappen at all.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see the role that Alonso plays in all of this, because although he wasn't quite as quick a starter as Russell in the last couple of starts, he wasn't bad, and he's been looking fairly feisty for you know, the restarts in the past. I can imagine him trying to get involved or to capitalise on Hamilton and Verstappen getting tied up. And we should remember the last time that we had a red flag this late in the race in a restart, a standing restart with Hamilton starting in second, was in Baku when he hit that the magic button, wasn't it, and sailed straight on at turn 1 after seemingly taking the lead. I'm sure he won't make that mistake again.
No, absolutely. Redesigned the back of his steering wheel after that, Hamilton, to put an extra sort of shroud in over that button so he didn't accidentally hit it. So the sun continuing to drop in the sky. Start of autumn in Australia, just coming up to 5 o'clock in the evening. Hamilton weaving around to try and get temperature into the tyres. We've had 56 laps of racing. The final 2 are about to get underway. And now the new rule from a couple of years ago, again introduced for the show in inverted commas, the standing start. So they line up on the grid again. They don't just restart behind the safety car. And that's another thing that you could sort of technically classify as unfair, potentially. But we'll get more into this in the Checker Flag podcast a little bit later on, which you'll be able to download. But the cars are now coming around to line up on the grid.
Can worms everywhere.
Yeah.
let's watch this race and enjoy it for what it is. As this final shootout, Verstappen, he has to do this final task to fully lay his claim to the Melbourne Grand Prix, and he just has to overcome this start. He's got one part-time pass start finish. That's going to be 2 racing laps to make sure that he comes away with victory here in Melbourne.
Here we go then. The tension is rising in the pit lane. Max Verstappen has angled his car towards the right-hand side to try and get across to the inside as quickly as possible in order to cut off Lewis Hamilton on the run down towards the first corner. A very, very defensive stance from Verstappen. Verstappen's got the pace over the rest of the field over a full race, but in a 2-lap sprint, can anyone stop him? Verstappen is starting on pole position. The final 2 laps of the Australian Grand Prix are about to get underway from the start grid. The lights go out, the race begins, and it's a decent start from Verstappen. He comes across and he gets ahead of Hamilton on the run down towards turn 1. Verstappen holds the lead, lock up from Alonso. Oh, and sailing in, Alonso and Sainz collide. Sainz hits Alonso. Alonso's in the barrier. Perez is off the circuit as well, and there's a big crash at the back. The Alpine is in the wall, and that could be the end of the race, because I don't think we'll do another red flag. A red flag is out, and that is arguably one of the disadvantages of doing a restart like this, because out of the race is Fernando Alonso, out is Lance Stroll, out is Esteban Ocon, out is Pierre Gasly. Both Alpines have shunted, and all of a sudden the race order is Verstappen, Hamilton, Sainz the top 3, Hülkenberg 4th, Tsunoda 5th, Norris, Piastri, Zhou and Bottas and Perez the top 10, and that has turned into a little bit of a nonsense at the end of this Grand Prix. Jack Aitken.
We're going to have to see a replay to unpick that, and we see 2 more cars off in the gravel. It's not just Stroll, who may have actually managed to get going through the gravel trap of turn 3, but Sargent completely beached in the gravel, and is that an AlphaTauri as well of De Vries. But my God, we're going to have to see a replay to unpick all of that. The 2 Alpines, after such a strong showing from Gasly, ending line astern in the barrier on the exit of turn 2. Gasly in particular took a big hit. He was up in the air, all 4 wheels, and landed back with a crash.
4 cars have crashed out at the restart of this Grand Prix.
Right, so the worst starter of the top 5 was actually Sainz. He gets a slow start and Gasly manages to get the jump on him. Alonso challenging Hamilton into turn 1. Gasly locks up fully. Meanwhile, Sainz goes into the back of Alonso. There's so many things going on at once. And was it the two Alpines that were side by side? We just lost the shot. But Gasly coming back on track, gets side by side with Ocon. And are they going to make contact? We missed the shot again. Yes, they crashed, the two Alpines. They crashed together in just their 3rd race together. And this is, of course, not new territory for Ocon. It's what the management at Alpine would have been dreading, and it's a big hit. Was it Ocon? No, it was Gasly that squeezed Ocon into the exit barrier of turn 2, where Magnussen lost his wheel.
Now, what could happen here? Because if you finish the race with a red flag, you take the order back from the last point it was possible to take the order. So actually, the red flag order could be the way they started on the grid, and they all end up in the race could finish in the order they just restarted the race in, now that there's a red flag. This is a bit silly.
Absolutely. Well, just saw the onboard of Ocon there. He pulls up alongside the rear wheel of Ocon going around the outside of turn 2, and they're heading towards the barrier. It looks like Gasly just does not see him, and he just drives them both into the wall. But should Ocon have seen that coming? Should he have backed out? It's a risky thing to do with your teammate. We just saw a board of Alonso going into the back of Sainz and tagging his rear right wheel. There's so much going on. Sorry, the other way around. Sainz going into the back of Alonso.
Well, they wanted a show. They got a show, F1.
My God, Perez had a fairly chunky bit of rim fly into his halo and bounce off of it, luckily. But yeah, action-packed restart, to say the least.
So Alonso from 3rd, got turned around by Sainz from 4th. Perez took evasive action from 7th. Gasly outbroke himself and went off the road, and then came back on the circuit and wiped out the other Alpine, his teammate, fed Ocon into the barriers.
Both of the AlphaTauris were in trouble there. It was De Vries spun at turn 1. Whether he had assistance, I'm not sure. And then it was, of course, De Vries that went off with Sargent at turn 3 and ended up in the gravel. So terrible restart for both of them as well.
Crash and carnage everywhere. 4 cars wiped out, 2 in the gravel, 2 in the wall. Alonso's back in the garage and is speaking to the Aston Martin team, and he is furious. The stewards are now technically we're on the final lap of the race because of that red flag, so we have got no more running to do, but the stewards are trying to work out what the result of this race is, because we can't do another lap.
Yeah, you're right. So the race will have to finish, but it's just whether they complete the lap under safety car, and then that would nullify the effect of taking a red flag back 1 lap and taking the results back.
But they can't establish a race. I think the race result is going to be what it was 20 minutes ago.
Unless they restart it.
Stupid rule. How the hell you can put a red flag before?
Yeah, copy.
Well,
maybe because we don't complete a lap, we go back to the same positions. It happened in Silverstone.
Yes, we're looking at that, mate. We're on that. We're already on that.
So
let's just get the car back. So, do you think there's damage?
Alonso.
No, it's okay. The car is okay.
Copy, mate. Okay.
Alonso.
Check this immediately. They should do it. They should do it.
Yep, we're on it.
And I that's the only option I can see happening, is that the race result will be what it was when the first red flag was caught.
Well, technically, they do have the option to restart. They are on the final lap, but if they leave pit lane under safety car and cross the line to take the checkered flag, then the race will finish and be classified as if the race finishes.
Correct, but they have no order in which to restart that race under.
Well, they can restart it. The race hasn't ended. They will only take the results back 1 lap if they end the race as it is now and classify it. The race is still going on. It's just red flagged and paused. If they choose to restart it under safety car, it will finish as normal, in air quotes.
But my point is, for that restart, I don't think they can. See what Alonso's saying here. No, I can't really hear. But my point is that you need a restart order. The red flag was flown on the run down towards turn 3, I think, or 4. So there is no I know there is the order in which they came into the pit lane, but I don't know if they can just use the mini sectors. They can just use the mini sectors to decide the race order?
They would take the order as it was when they threw the red flag at that moment. So yeah, it would be by the mini sectors, so they can do that. I agree it's very unlikely. It would be a little bit comical to have the cars go out under the safety car and literally just cross the road.
It's already comical, isn't it?
Even more comical. These are the two options that race control have. End it now and take the results back one lap to how it was before this restart, as Alonso was pitching for, obviously, or they can do it like this. Those are the two options. I just do want to point out, which I've seen someone on Twitter say, Hülkenberg is up to 4th. Sainz was the one that pitched off Alonso.
No, a Hülkenberg podium.
Could it be?
Wow.
I'm asking for the restart just for that alone.
Nico Hülkenberg.
Quite the story.
Nico Hülkenberg. I think he's got the record of the most F1 starts with no podium. I'm pretty sure. Hülkenberg then 4th. Else, this is an interesting point from Else. He says the red flag was still the right call, and the restart. If the drivers cannot be trusted not to make an absolute palaver of that restart, that's their fault.
I agree. I stand by my earlier comments that this was the right thing to do, but yeah, everyone was getting pretty desperate in these final laps. They knew that this was a big opportunity. And Sargent, we're on board with him there. Last car on track, and he just slams into the back of De Vries. And that's a shame. It was De Vries, and just shovels them both into the gravel of turn 1, and that's how they ended up there.
So, Mark says, can the FIA get on the phone to NASCAR and ask them how to do red flag restarts properly? So we are now in this bizarre situation where everybody's out of the car, all the drivers are out, just wandering around in the pit lane. Lewis Hamilton's walking around with his dad, having a little pat on the back with Jerome D'Ambrosio and Toto Wolff. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen are chatting to Helmut Marko. We're on the final lap of the race in Australia. The red flag is out, but we're waiting for the FIA to decide what to do. So we're all just sort of sitting here, chilling. I got my feet up on the desk. Aiken's surfing through social media. Carlos Sainz is still sitting in his car, interestingly enough. So he's decided not to get out. And no one knows what exactly is going on.
So Benny's just made a good point on the Radio
Andrew
5.
Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer.
Yes, that Benny. He's made a good point that there have been instances in the past where they haven't used the mini sectors for the red flag positioning if they feel that the race hasn't gone far enough. So i.e. if it was a very quick red flag, say after the first couple of corners, which were not far off in this case. I think it was turn 4, turn 5 that they called the red flag here. They do have the right to just say, no, that wasn't enough racing. We're just going to recall the positions as they were when they were at the line. So there is an argument to say they could do that, which would, of course, be effectively the same as taking the results back to before the red flag.
Yeah, and I think that's what I don't quite understand is that seems like the only option. It seems like the only option. And then you could have done it 10 minutes ago, and you could have got, you know what? Yeah, red flag, carnage, take the results back a lap to the restart lap, and everyone's happy at that point. Everyone's like, okay, fine, we tried it, big red flag, we literally have no more laps.
It's just if the FIA are intent on taking this race right to the end.
Yeah, but you gave it a go to do the restart. If the drivers all crash into each other, then fine.
No, sure, absolutely. If they want to do that, they would absolutely be within their right. This is just the choice that they have. Technically, within the regulations, they could still restart this with the positions as they are displayed if they feel that enough racing was done on that previous lap, which it was less than half a lap, so it's on the edge. But if they decide that there was enough racing and that's the classification as of lap 58 and they want to finish it under a safety car, this could be the finishing order. It's possible, but unlikely, I agree.
I think, but also, I mean, the FIA here are starting, the longer this goes on, the more, the FIA are the sports governing body, and it's up to them rather than Formula One themselves. Formula One are the promoter of the sport, and they, book the races, put the races on, but the FIA are in charge of the sports. And Rosanna Tennant I mean, it's only, 3 months since Max Verstappen won the World Championship, but no one knew that he had.
Yes, more confusion for Formula One and its fan base, and for people here in the paddock. We are so close to all the people that have the information, and yet none of us know what's going on. People keep on going up to each other saying, do you know, have you heard what's actually happening? Are they going back to the order before? Nick de Vries has just walked past me and headed back into AlphaTauri's hospitality area, and Logan Sargent as well. So both drivers okay after their collision. It's just a shame that it's so confusing. It should just be much simpler, I feel.
Oh, this is F1, Rosanna, surely not. But
apparently the crowd on the start-finish straight, according to Jackie Baker-Stubbs, who's got in touch, hashtag BBC F1, are chanting, one more lap, one more lap.
Do you know what? I was at Daytona 500 in 2013, where I think they released the cars for one more lap, and I don't really want to relive what we saw at the end of that. We had a tyre ending up in the grandstand. So, yeah, there's a bit of one more lap vibes going on, but I'm not sure. After what we've just seen, feels a bit feisty.
Richard says F1 has levelled up from not knowing who's won at the end of a race to not even knowing when the race has ended.
So there's conflicting messages coming through to different teams at the moment. So Alonso has been told by his engineer, we believe that the race will be classified like this, we're just looking for confirmation. And on the other end of the scale, McLaren have been telling their drivers, Lando Norris in
Jack,
particular.
I've just had a bit of an update, actually. They're going to probably put them back to the positions they were before. They'll do an out lap and one final lap.
When you say the positions
that is
before,
hot off the press.
Do you mean before the restart?
Well, the problem is, of course, that's going to involve some people not being able to take part because they're already out. So I guess you then close up the order. They're just waiting for the track to be cleared. Then they're going to get them out, an out lap, and then restart. That's what I've heard. That's what someone has just said. In a position of power in Formula One.
This does make sense, and I think I can explain.
Steiner is just walking past. Gunther. Oh, I'm trying to get... No. See, I don't have the Netflix crew with me. I don't very much gravitas.
And I was going to say, Gunther on the radio at 8:15 is a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
That's a wake-up call, isn't it?
Yeah, language-wise.
That's a wake-up call.
So, if this is what they do, basically what that means is they decided there wasn't enough racing on that previous restart to justify classifying the cars for a new restart in those positions, similar to what Andrew Benson was saying. So they're going to take the positions back to the previous restart, and then they are also going to choose to resume under safety car to finish the race. So yeah, it will be as the order was prior to the restart, minus the cars that are now DNF.
But what a waste of everyone's time, no?
But that's how the rules seem to be.
But no, it's a red flag now. Surely you can just finish the race under red flag.
No, because if they finish the race now, then the cars that have crashed will be classified.
Oh, I see. So they're doing it just to wipe out the Alpines. Basically, is what we're saying.
That is one way of putting it.
Because at the moment, Gasly and Ocon are the only two drivers in the top 10 that were
There
not...
is so much cheering going on. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know what they're cheering at, but the crowd are going wild.
For Daniel Ricciardo on the TV.
Yeah.
No, is that what it is?
Yeah,
that's what
it was.
is.
They put Daniel Ricciardo on the big screen.
I was thinking track invasion. I was thinking all sorts, but no.
So then that also brings up the question, if they do this and they...
The cheers now because Oscar Piastri's on the TV. And Piastri,
yeah, I've wised up now.
if that does happen, Piastri could end up in ninth place.
There are a few different consequences here, because also, will they penalise Sainz for hitting Alonso? You would think they would.
Have to,
yeah, they have to, because that's been part of the race now. So even if they take the positions back to as they were and Alonso gets reinstated into third and Sainz would be fourth, Gasly potentially would benefit from a penalty, for example, of Sainz. So there's a little bit of unpicking to go on here.
So the restart, this feels like the big cheer now is for Toto Wolff on the big screens. So, okay, so what's going to happen is they will restart in the order that they did the restart in before, minus the cars that...
Minus Gasly and Ocon.
Minus Gasly and Ocon, the two Alpines that crashed out. And then they will leave the pit lane, they will drive around for a lap, and then they will behind the safety car, and then they will take the checkered flag. So I can tell you right now the finishing order, but we have to wait 15 minutes for 10 minutes or whatever for it to happen.
Give the rundown without the Alpines anyway.
Verstappen will win the Grand Prix, Hamilton second, Alonso third, 4th will be Sainz, 5th will be Lance Stroll, 6th will be Sergio Perez, 7th Lando Norris, 8th Nico Hülkenberg, 9th will be Oscar Piastri, and 10th, I think, will be Yuki Tsunoda. So that will be the finishing order, but we now just have to wait for them to go round again or something.
Yep, we just need to wait for them to complete the race distance. So slightly roundabout way of getting there, but ultimately the bottom line for me is that they've carried out the restart, and drivers have been a little bit too exuberant in quite a few cases. We had a few different incidents going on there, but drivers have been a bit over exuberant. We've had a few crashes. It wasn't enough of a racing lap completed because the red flag came out so quickly due to that big crash at turn 2 that the FIA basically said it's not reasonable for us to deduce who was in front of who, because the cars were still so close together. Therefore, we're not going to take those positions as they were. However, we are going to complete the race as planned, even though it's less than a full lap of racing remaining.
So, but Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, reckons that they can race, but I can't work that out because we're on lap 58 now.
No, they've passed the timing beacon, so the next time will be the checkered flag, surely.
Yeah.
And they can't add a lap on as they do in NASCAR or IMSA, for example. But I believe that the next time by, we will basically have the safety car lead them out. Safety car will pit to allow them to ceremonially take the checkered flag, but they shouldn't be able to race.
Yeah, because, we can bring in the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. He's in the media centre in Melbourne. Andrew, as far as Verstappen appears to have completed 57 laps of racing, so the lap to the grid will be the 58th, surely. Or the lap around to the start, I should say.
No. So what they're saying is, I think, because it's very clear from the FIA message that there will be a rolling start, and as there will be only one lap left, the checkered flag will be out as they come back across the line. So there's some slight uncertainty.
But I think does that not mean it's a rolling start and the checkered flag? The safety car will peel in, and it'll be a rolling start, and that's the checkered flag then.
I don't know. Let's find out. But
yeah, I think immediately it will be
in third, right? So they haven't kept. Well, I don't know. Let's find out. But they're obviously taking it back to the order that they were in at the start, the final restart that we just had.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they've got 2 laps left because they haven't completed enough to count? So they're not counting lap 57 in other words.
That restart did happen,
but
they're just not allowing. They're not taking the classification from the lap that happened because it was there wasn't enough racing, as you mentioned in previous instances, to really classify the cars. The lap still happened, and we are on lap 58, so it will be the checkered flag the next time around.
Rosanna, do you want to have a bash?
Yeah, I just had it confirmed, or at least I think I have, that yes, they'll take the start behind the safety car, and the next time they come around, it will be the checkered. So it's essentially a lap behind the safety car.
Right. So, I mean,
fun.
Yeah. So as you say, Jack, it's basically to get rid of the cars that had crashed from the results.
I can see our Checker Flag podcast being quite spicy because I'm sensing a difference of opinions here. I'm still I know that this looks a little bit farcical, but there are reasons for what has happened, and we'll get into it in the podcast afterwards. But I do think there are good reasons for everything that's happened here, for wanting to get the restart done, to put on that show for the fans. Unfortunate that there was so much carnage at the restart, but I can completely understand why the FIA weren't confident in taking the positions at the point that they flew the red flag. It was just there was so much going on. Cars were still side by side, and even Stroll was still going into the gravel at turn 3 as the red flag came out. So it would have been impossible to really properly tell where each car was at that exact moment, hence why they're going back to these positions.
But anyway, I'm still very strongly of the opinion when the red flag comes out, you can finish a race under a red flag, the order just goes back a lap, and then you just finish it in the order at the original red flag, and then we'd have been done 20 minutes ago.
But The only reason that they would finish under a red flag is because they feel that they can't restart it in time. So the rules have also changed since, when was it? Actually, I forget what I said. Basically, the only reason for not restarting is if they feel they cannot, either because of time or because of logistical issues with the track, the barrier, some kind of safety issue. Otherwise, within the time limit, they will always try to restart the race. So they are doing the correct thing here by carrying on and not finishing the race under red.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so you can
They could have subjectively just said, sorry, it's going to take us way too long to clean up the mess at turn 2, so we are finishing the race now. But that would have been the subjective, well, are you just saying that because you want to revert positions?
Yeah.
They are doing the correct thing here by trying to take the distance, the full distance of the race.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So that, you can finish the red under a red flag in extraordinary circumstances, but not just because you can't be bothered to do the restart because it's pointless.
I believe so.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Chris says the whole point of the red flag after the Magnussen retirement was to avoid a finish behind the safety car. So now the plan is to finish behind the safety car an hour later. It's a very.
But we had some good action in between. I mean, some excitement.
Yeah.
It's a sizable hole in the Alpine budget this year. It's significant, and that should be talked about. That's going to have a real impact on their development for the rest of the year.
Hayden says, surely it was a 2-lap shootout. A sector wasn't completed, so the restart should be 2 laps long. Unfortunately not, basically, because the red flag came out as they were on that 57th lap. They still had to return to the pits, which completed the 57th lap. So now we have 1 lap to go. They can't just send them out the pit lane to race. They've got to go around again to the start-finish straight. Again, there's an argument that a formation lap doesn't count at the start of a Grand Prix, so why does this cap whatever? But those are the rules.
Because as a safety car restart, it is a lap, and you're exactly right. They did complete the distance. That is the crucial thing here. So even though they weren't confident to take the positions because of all the mess that was going on, not least Stroll flying into the gravel at turn 3, it wouldn't have been fair to the drivers who were fighting, who were side by side when the red flag came out, when Stroll was going into the gravel. Was he ahead of another car or not? It's just impossible to tell. So they're doing the right thing in taking the positions back from the last known point, which of course was the point of the restart.
Well, I've got one more thing to throw at you in a second. 9 minutes until, well, in 9 minutes time, the cars will go out behind the safety car, drive around for a lap, and Max Verstappen will win the Grand Prix. So that's what's going to happen in 9 minutes time. So then in 12 minutes time we will be about 15, I promise, we'll be going to weekend breakfast. Sorry about this, everybody. But that's what's going to happen. It's a bit silly. My question now to you, Jack Aitken, what if they'd just thrown a safety car instead of a red flag and then just finished it then and then we were done?
Yep. I mean, I was about to say they could have done. Could they have done? Was there just too much of that metal shrapnel from Magnussen's wheel to feasibly clear it up?
Sorry. The current red flag we're in.
Current one.
After all that carnage, you could have done a safety car for a lap.
It's the same thing. It's a safety issue, and it's up to race control to determine: are we going to be putting marshals' lives at risk, drivers' lives at risk, if we have to get heavy machinery out there to clear the Alpines? I mean, there were 4 cars off track at that point, so I think they made the right decision. It was just too much carnage to feasibly keep running around even under a safety car.
So, as I say, they're going to. There will be no restart to this race. Basically, they will go out behind the safety car, do 1 lap behind the safety car, and then the checkered flag will be waiting for them when the safety car comes into the pits. So no one will be able to overtake at any point during this 1 lap.
Yep. The only drama that can happen now is if a car breaks down on the way to the checkered flag.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get that. That would be pretty unfortunate.
We've had a tweet in here from well, it's a very long name, but only Formula One can fall over its own rule book while simultaneously using that rule book to slap itself in the face.
It is a very Formula One thing to happen.
Yeah,
I think I'm standing on the fence of defending F1 slightly here, but yeah, I agree. It is all slightly comical.
I think it just needs to be a bit more, just sort of flexible. I mean, look, these arguments happen in all sports, don't they? Where Carlos Sainz has been given a penalty, a 5-second time penalty.
Oh, that's
so
terrible.
That means that Stroll will finish 4th. And that 5 seconds is good for causing a collision.
It'll put him out of the points easily because of the nature of the restart. Everyone's going to be tightly punched. He will try his best.
But Hülkenberg is down in 9th, so it won't be Hülkenberg getting the podium.
I know, such a shame. And yeah, so Sainz will do his very best to make a gap through the final sector safely, because of course they're going to be coming to the checkered flag. So I'm not sure if he will be able to do anything there. And he can't leave more than 10 car lengths of a gap to the car in front of him, so he has to be very careful to not pick up a further penalty. We're just getting images of him gesticulating
on the radio, isn't he?
He's gesticulating in the car, very upset. But we're getting the replay on board of him now. I mean, it's unfortunate. You know, Alonso takes a very wide berth through turn 1. And Sainz was on the racing line. He just couldn't slow himself down in time for Alonso coming back further across the racing line to avoid being on the AstroTurf on the exit. So it's, I mean, I do think it's more Carlos's fault than not, but I sympathise. That's a fairly hefty penalty because of the way the restart will happen.
Also, I thought there was usually everyone's a bit more chilled because it's a race start. At the race start, you usually get a bit more leeway, yeah. Because that looked I mean, Sainz has hit him and turned him around, but Alonso's got way more space to the left on the Astro.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, they could have waited until the race had finished and had everyone come up to the stewards' room to discuss it, and maybe they would have come to a different result, but then it comes back to, we want the fans to see the result on the screen as being the result, not something that comes out 2 hours later. So that's why they are doing what they're doing by giving the penalty now. And we're now seeing as well the turn 2 incident between Gasly and Ocon is under investigation.
So we are going to be restarting this race in 4 minutes' time. They will do a lap behind the safety car, which will take about two and a half minutes. And then it'll be time for Weekend Breakfast here on BBC Radio 5 Live with Chris and Ellie. Later on today, 5 Live Sport gets underway at midday. Steve Crossman with you to bring you all the build-up to today's Premier League action. We've got commentary of both here on 5 Live. West Ham versus Southampton, 19th versus 20th in the table. And then Newcastle versus Man United at Old Trafford at 4:30. Here's Sainz.
We have 5 seconds penalty. No, it cannot be, Ricky. Do I deserve to be out of the points? No. It's unacceptable. Tell them it is unacceptable. They need to wait until the race is finished and discuss with me. No, please, ask them, please, to wait and discuss with me. Clearly the penalty is not deserved. It's too severe.
So, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about discussing after the race versus getting the penalty done during the race. And that has been a criticism of the stewards in the past, that they too often wait until the race is finished and then take 2 hours to decide something. That's what Carlos is pitching for, because he has a better chance there, obviously, rather than a slam dunk penalty now. And I do agree it's very severe, but it's just unfortunate that I don't think the stewards have an option less severe than 5 seconds during the race.
You can't give him a half-second time penalty.
You can't do place penalties while the race is still going on, obviously. And this brings up a question that I've seen pop up on social media already, so I'll try and address it. How is Sainz being given a penalty if the lap didn't happen? Because effectively they're going back to the positions as they were before.
If Sainz hits Alonso in a forest and no one's around to hear it,
Schrodinger's cat. The lap did happen. This is the slightly confusing thing, but basically the distance was completed, the lap happened, all of the actions that the drivers took during that lap were, you know, valid and under race conditions and therefore subject to penalties.
Apart from the overtakes didn't happen.
The overtakes did not happen because they can't be verified, because the FIA can't be sure that when they brought out the red flag that overtaking manoeuvres hadn't been completed, whether they were still ongoing, whether Lance Stroll was still bouncing across the gravel at turn 3. I'm sorry, it's just too funny not to mention again. And that is why the placings and the overtakings in FIA's eyes didn't happen, and they have to revert that part. But the drivers are still responsible for driving in a safe manner and in a responsible manner and subject to the rules, and that's why Carlos is being penalised.
Well, the cars are firing up because in 1 minute's time they will head out behind the safety car. Last night, Anthony Joshua returned to winning ways. He had a unanimous points victory over Jermaine Franklin at the O2 Arena, and Arsenal maintained their 8-point advantage at the top of the Premier League. They beat Leeds 4-1. Man City beat Liverpool 4-1 as well in the lunchtime match. And did the Joshua fight go the full length then? Did it? Yeah. So you think a Formula One race is now going the full length, but I don't think it'll be unanimous. There you go. There's some sporting segue for you.
Definitely not.
Aston Villa beat Chelsea 2-0, which increased at Stamford Bridge as well, which increased the pressure on Chelsea's boss Graham Potter. That's will be discussed later on, I'm sure, with Crossman and the gang from noon. And the cars are about to head out on circuit to do a lap behind the safety car and then take the checkered flag. Jack Aitken.
The only remaining thing for us to commentate over and give any sort of insight is how Sainz is going to handle this restart, because 5 seconds is almost sure to put him out of the points, because he's in fourth place, 6 cars behind him for paying positions. He will try his very, very best to leave a legal gap within 10 car lengths to the car in front of him for the last sector, and then push like crazy to try and make up as much time as he can on those behind him, to stretch out those gaps between the cars and hope that is enough for 5 seconds to keep him in the top 10.
Alpine are going to be fuming at this decision, aren't they? They've lost a 5th and a 10th in all of this. Here's Verstappen's radio.
Okay, Max. So plan is safety car will enter the pit lane at the end of this lap. You will then take the checkered flag. It's a rolling start, i.e. just take the checkered flag. There is no overtaking until the line.
I've just seen a very good point on Twitter. Gasly, if he gets a penalty for that incident, which if it's anyone's fault, it's Gasly's,
yeah,
he'll be over his penalty points allowance and he'll miss a race. Because he's been, on 10 penalty points for some time now. It's been a big subject for Alpine. They tried to get penalty points removed to avoid this happening, because they were arguing that some of them weren't justified. That they didn't manage to do that. So, yeah, you could be in for a race ban here if he gets a penalty and it's severe enough.
Crikey. Well, we've got a bit of a break before the next Grand Prix. Might all need it after this interesting race. 4 weeks actually until Baku, the next Grand Prix on the calendar. Verstappen now is out behind the safety car. The cars are out on track. They're weaving around behind the safety car, and as we just heard, GP Giampiero Gambassi, Max Verstappen's race engineer, saying to him on the radio, the safety car will pull into the pits and Verstappen will come around the corner and take the checkered flag. That's what's going to happen. He's going to win for the second time this season. He's going to extend his lead at the top of the championship, not by a huge amount, because Sergio Perez is finishing 6th with the fastest lap. So Perez will pick up 9 points and Verstappen will pick up 25. So the gap will go up to 17 points at the top of the championship. Verstappen's advantage over Sergio Perez. Now here comes Verstappen through the final couple of corners. We'll keep an eye on Carlos Sainz on what he does. He's not backing them up yet. Now he starts to back them up. Comes through the final corner here, Verstappen. The checker flag is waiting, and in one of the most fascinating Grand Prix for a long time, one of the most bizarre ending Grand Prix for a long time, Max Verstappen takes the checkered flag in Melbourne, wins the Australian Grand Prix in bizarre circumstances. Behind the safety car, Hamilton finishes second, Alonso finishes third. In the end, it's Lance Stroll in fourth. Fifth is Sergio Perez, Norris, Hülkenberg, Piastri, Zhou and Yuki Tsunoda, the top 10. 12 cars take the finish after 20 started. A remarkable 2.5 hours of Formula One. Not all racing, but some Formula One. So it's about time we head to weekend breakfast. Thanks to Rosanna Tennant and especially to Jack Aitken for bringing some common sense to all of this nonsense. But yeah, time to head to weekend breakfast with Chris Warburton and Ellie Oldroyd.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you for the team for trying to pick your way through. I mean, I think fascinating is one word starting with F. There are others that you might like to put in yourself potentially.
I'm not entirely sure what happened, to be honest.
No, I'm not either. But look, everything will be in the Checkered Flag podcast. Mm-hmm. So that will pick it apart. I mean, it's one of those things. Sport is a funny thing.
It's one of them, isn't it?
It's one of them ones. Anyway, look, we're going to try and pack as much weekend.